Welcome. Tonight we will follow an ordinary day in a 14th century European city during the Bubonic plague. Dawn begins without ceremony in a European city during the years 1348 to 1350. The streets are narrow, the houses are close, and the sound is limited to regular tasks that continue under regulation. The city maintains watch at its gates and along its lanes. The morning air is cool and carries smoke from small hearths. This account describes one ordinary day and follows it from early light to night under existing measures. The quarter is divided into sections with named supervisors. Each section holds a list of households and the number of residents recorded during the previous week. Notices are posted near the church door and at the town hall with short updates on restrictions and hours. The lists mark addresses with recent illness. The markings are simple and visible from the street. Food and water are managed in a steady way. Wells and fountains operate with time slots and small lines form without crowding. Bread is baked in predictable amounts using fixed measures of grain. The price is posted and checked by the market weight inspectors. Deliveries from outlying mills arrive less often and are logged by the gate clerk. Movement is limited and follows a known schedule. The city watch opens the gates at planned times and reduces traffic during the heat of the day. Carriers hold papers that show permission to pass. Routes avoid lanes with marked doors. People keep to the right side to reduce contact and pass without speaking. Households follow a maintenance routine. Bedding is aired at windows during short intervals. Clothing is brushed and left near warmth or sun when available. Pots and cups are washed with hot water and, when possible, with a diluted sour solution. The order does not vary from one day to the next. Information moves in a defined path. Town clerks copy short bulletins about closures and reopenings. Announcements cover the status of markets, bakehouses, and public ovens. The wording uses standard phrases to prevent misunderstanding. A crier repeats the text at set corners and then returns the board to the hall. Religious practice adapts to rules that limit gatherings. Morning prayers occur in reduced form with distances observed. The priest keeps a record of home visits by day and hour. Processions do not form. Bells ring at regular intervals to mark time, not to assemble a crowd. Work continues where it can be organized with spacing. Tanners, millers, and bakers follow schedules that stagger tasks. Artisans complete repairs ordered in writing and leave finished items at thresholds. Payment uses coin counted on a cloth to avoid repeated handling of surfaces. If work is delayed, the delay is noted rather than debated. Care for the unwell is handled within the household first. Symptoms are noted in simple terms: heat, weakness, swelling in certain areas. A separate room is preferred, or a partition within a room. Airing and washing occur more often around the sickbed. The aim is to keep actions predictable and measurable. Officials inspect streets on a route that repeats every day. They check that closures remain in place and that signs are legible. If a door requires a new mark, the mark is applied and entered into a ledger. If goods need fumigation, a brazier is brought and the process is timed. Each step produces a small entry with date and place. Merchants adjust to restricted trade. Goods that are not essential remain stored. Materials that spoil quickly are sold early and in small quantities. Long-distance traders wait outside the walls in organized rows. Factors meet them at a boundary point to exchange papers and view samples rather than full bales. Timekeeping remains consistent. The city uses bells, water clocks, and the pace of ordinary tasks to divide the day. Work periods are set in whole hours. The midday pause is short and quiet. Evening signals start before dusk to allow for return and accounting. The city manages waste in a limited but regular system. Carts move with covers and dumping grounds lie outside the walls. The route is fixed to reduce random stops. Lime is used in specific places and recorded by weight. The same crew repeat the process on alternating days. Schools and guild meetings are suspended or reduced. Instruction shifts to reading at home using available primers. Young apprentices perform errands under supervision and within short distances. Masters verify progress by written notes. Gatherings that would increase contact are postponed without exception. External communication slows but does not cease. Letters are kept aside and aired before delivery. Seals remain intact until the addressee is present at the threshold. Replies are brief and factual. Messengers travel with a schedule that reduces overnight stays in unfamiliar inns. By afternoon, household activities return to maintenance. Grain is measured for the next morning's bread or gruel. Water containers are checked and refilled for evening use. Lamps are readied with small amounts of oil. Doors and shutters are inspected for closures that must hold after dark. Health measures are repeated without change. Hands are cleaned with water and available mixtures. Clothes are set near a hearth or in light for a set period. Shelves are wiped in a standard order from top to bottom. The sequence is identical each day to avoid confusion. Those who must report deaths do so in the same location and manner. The form asks for name if known, address, observe signs, and hour. Carriers assigned to removal follow a timetable and avoid contact with other tasks. The burial ground operates on a fixed path from gate to trench and back. The ledger entry closes the case for that day. Evening movement narrows to the nearest lanes. The watch makes rounds and notes any open shutters after the bell. The streets empty according to custom rather than force. Households settle with minimal light. The sound reduces to private activity inside walls. This introduction defines the frame and process of a normal day in a city during the middle years of the 14th century. It states locations, actors, and routines without emphasis. The following sections continue hour by hour, keeping to measurable steps, recorded notices, and ordinary maintenance. The aim is to provide a continuous description that does not seek to persuade or alarm, but to register actions in order. The day takes place in a European city during the years 1348 to 1350. The settlement stands within stone walls with 4 main gates and a few posterns that remain closed except by written order. The plan of the city is compact. Lanes are narrow, many of them paved in only the central strip, and drainage follows a gentle slope toward ditches near the walls. Houses are built in close rows with timber frames, wattle and daub infill, and occasional stone fronts along the market streets. Roofs are tiled or thatched according to district rules. The city is divided into administrative quarters, each under a supervisor who keeps rolls of households and reports changes once per week to the town clerk. Seasonal conditions set the pace for basic tasks. In late spring and summer, the opening bell sounds earlier and light allows work to start before the first market hour. In autumn and winter, the first movements shift later, and fuel needs increase, which affects the time required for tending hearths and fetching wood. Weather is recorded in brief notes: clear, overcast, light rain, heavy rain, frost, because these entries determine whether airing bedding and clothing is practical. Wind direction is also noted by the watch on the towers, as it influences smoke dispersal and the choice of streets for carts. Population density is high in the inner wards and lower near the walls and along the river. Extended families share rooms above workshops. Tenants are listed by name where available, but many entries consist of a trade and a count of persons. The presence of animals is limited by ordinance. Pigs and poultry are common in side courts, while larger animals move under escort and at fixed hours. Water points are distributed so that each ward has at least one public well or fountain. A few private wells exist behind gates and are recorded as such. Waste removal follows a scheduled route toward pits outside the walls, and lime is applied at points specified by the council. Authorities publish measures that define movement and contact. The watch keeps a board at each main gate with the current market times, the list of closed lanes, and any change in the handling of goods. A red or black mark on house doors indicates a recent report of illness. These marks are simple shapes, repainted as needed to remain visible. A ledger in the town hall shows dates of application and removal. Gate traffic is reduced to essential carts and carriers with sealed notes. The notes state the route, the load, and the expected return time. Non-essential travel is postponed. Inns within the walls admit only persons with cleared papers. Food supply is steady but simplified. Bakers receive grain by weight and produce loaves of fixed sizes. Millers operate on reduced rotations to limit contact at the stones and sacks. Butchers work fewer days, with offal disposal monitored by the quarter supervisors. Herbs, dried legumes, and preserved fish form a larger share of diet than in previous years. This change is recorded by the pricing tables posted near the market cross. The bread assize and the balance checks are carried out by inspectors at regular intervals, with fines recorded in a separate column of the accounts. Households plan meals around items that keep well and involve short preparation. Work continues under adjustment. Tanners, fullers, and dyers limit shared equipment and schedule rinsing by hour. Smiths and carpenters fulfill written orders and leave finished items at thresholds with the account sheet folded under a pebble or tied cord. Cloth workers receive bales at boundary sheds rather than at shop doors. Apprentices run errands within defined perimeters and present tokens at corners to confirm passage. Guild meetings are suspended. Instruction shifts to reading from primers and copying short text at home. Masters attest progress by brief notes pinned to shop doors at week's end. Religious and civic institutions reduce gatherings while maintaining regular signals. Bells mark the canonical hours and the starts and ends of market periods. Public prayers occur outside or in dispersed groups with a measured spacing, and the duration is shorter than before. The priest keeps a list of households requesting visits and writes the time of each call in the margin. Courts hear only urgent cases and conduct them in larger rooms with windows open when weather permits. Tax collection continues with staggered hours, and receipts are cut in 2 matching parts, one for the payer, one for the roll, so reconciliation is exact. Domestic space is organized to support repetition of routine. The main room holds the hearth, a table, and storage chests. Bedding is folded and placed near windows for short airing periods when permitted by weather and rules. Clothing is brushed and hung where air circulates. Pots and cups are washed once after breakfast and once after the evening meal, with a third washing added if a person in the household is unwell. A small reserve of fuel is kept near the door to limit trips to the wood store. Floors are swept toward the doorway and waste is collected for removal on scheduled days only. Communication follows defined channels. The crier reads new measures at set corners using the same phrases each time to prevent misunderstanding. Sheets with the full text are posted at the church porch and the town hall door. Scribes copy short summaries for quarter supervisors who then add marginal notes relevant to their lanes. Letters arriving from other towns are set aside on a board near the guardroom window for a fixed airing period before delivery. Seals remain intact until the addressee appears. Replies are brief and list only necessary facts. The messenger takes a token to certify the handover. Health observations are recorded in simple terms. Symptoms noted include heat of the body, weakness, pain at the joints, and swelling in specific regions. The practice is to separate the symptomatic person in a room or by a screen to allow more frequent airing of that space, and to dedicate certain vessels and cloths to that use only. A small list kept by the household names the affected person, the first day of signs, and any changes. These notes assist the quarter supervisor in completing weekly returns. The records are plain and avoid interpretation. Quarantine rules are understood and basic. New arrivals from outside the walls or from other quarters with many marks stay apart for a set number of days. Goods that traveled far are rested in sheds at the perimeter, and notes on their bundles indicate the date of last handling. Fumigation with controlled smoke is applied to certain items. After the required time, materials are moved inward with a brief confirmation at the gate. Households that have illness reported restrict visits to thresholds only. Neighbors exchange information by voice at a distance or by passing lists and small packets across door sills. Timekeeping is consistent. The opening bell rings at a fixed hour relative to first light, and work periods proceed in whole hours with a short pause at midday. Evening signals start before dusk to allow orderly return. The watch notes the hour of each patrol, and the quarter supervisor records that time in his margin. By standardizing hours, the city ensures that tasks like fetching water, buying bread, and airing fabrics do not overlap with inspections or with each other. The result is a day composed of blocks that repeat with minor adjustments for weather and supply. External contact is limited but controlled. Traders with essential goods wait in lines outside the walls, and factors meet them at designated points to inspect samples and exchange papers. Fewer fairs are held, and when they occur, the days are shorter, and the ground is partitioned into lanes with markers. transit of letters and small parcels continues, but departures and arrivals are batched to reduce the number of openings at the gates. The names of senders and receivers are copied into a register with dates. This record allows tracing of paths when required by the Council. This context sets a stable frame for the day. It defines the built environment, the administrative divisions, the basic rules of movement, the supply of food and fuel, and the expected form of communication. It does not seek to explain causes or make judgments. It enumerates the conditions under which the following hours will proceed. The rest of the account moves through the same ground by time, recording ordinary actions in order and noting only those variations that affect the length or sequence of tasks. Before the opening bell, the household rises in sequence. The door bar is lifted, the shutter is unpinned, and a narrow opening is made to admit air. Embers from the previous night are checked in the hearth. If embers remain, they are stirred and fed with thin kindling. If no embers remain, a tinderbox is used and the flame is established with small splits. The window is kept partly open for a short interval, then closed to avoid drafts. The table is cleared of the items left from the evening. The first task is an inspection of persons and rooms. Health is reviewed without commentary. The head of the household touches foreheads and wrists to assess heat, observes the rate of breathing, and asks for reports of pain at the joints or swelling in known locations. A short list on a scrap of paper or a wax tablet is updated: name, signs, day of onset, hour of change, if any. If a person remains without signs, a line is drawn after the entry to mark continuity. If a person shows new signs, a note is added and a separate sleeping place is arranged behind a curtain or screen. The vessels, cloths, and bedding for that space are marked by a thread or notch and are kept separate for washing later in the day. The room is aired in a fixed order. Bedding is shaken and placed near the window for a count of minutes known to the household. Clothing that was worn the day before is brushed along seams and left on pegs where air circulates. Floors are swept toward the door and small piles are transferred to a covered container for removal on the next scheduled day. Shelves are wiped with a cloth moistened in warm water or a weak sour solution. The same sequence is applied every morning to reduce error. Window, bedding, clothing, floor, shelves. Each step is completed before the next begins. Fuel and water are set for the morning use. A measure of dry wood is brought from the store, sufficient for boiling and for a short period of warmth. Larger logs are left for later hours. 2 pots are placed on the trivet, one for water to heat for washing, one for the morning pottage. A small earthenware bowl is filled with a diluted vinegar mixture used for wiping hands and certain surfaces. The oil lamp wick is trimmed in case light is needed at the inner end of the room. Utensils to be used in the morning are taken from a chest and set on the table in the same places as on previous days. Food preparation follows a simple plan. Grain measured the previous evening is put into the pot with water and a small amount of salt if available. If a portion of stale bread exists, it is cut into pieces and added to thicken the mixture. If beans or peas are on hand, a small quantity is included to maintain variety. The pot is brought to a simmer and left to thicken while other tasks are performed. If the household contributes dough to the public oven on certain days, the time is checked against the posted schedule to avoid gathering near the oven door. Water collection is planned for those who are able. Containers are inspected for soundness and cleanliness. Lids and stoppers are checked. A person assigned to the well carries the containers and a pass if one is required for the hour. The route to the well is chosen to avoid lanes with marked doors and to keep to the right-hand side. At the well, people stand at measured distances and proceed in turn. The well warden notes the hour and observes the state of the ropes and windlass. After filling, the containers are sealed and carried back without delay. On return, a small amount of water is heated immediately for hand washing. Personal washing is brief and methodical. Hands and faces are cleaned with warm water. The sour mixture is used to wipe fingers and palms. Cloths for drying are assigned by person and hung after use near moderate warmth. Combs and simple grooming tools are cleaned and returned to their place. If a person is under observation for signs, they wash in the separate space with dedicated water and cloths. The basin for that space is emptied apart from the common drain, as agreed in the household rule. Household tools are placed where they will be used later in the morning. A knife, an awl, a hammer, or other implements for minor repairs are laid on the table. Thread, twine, and nails are counted to avoid searching during work hours. If an order was left at the threshold during the night, the folded paper is opened and read, and the request is placed in the day's order of tasks. If no order arrived, regular maintenance proceeds. Apprentices or older children are given simple errands within a defined perimeter, such as to leave a note at a neighbor's threshold or to collect a small parcel from the boundary shed. Tokens are provided to show at the street corner if asked by the watch. The quarter supervisor begins his first round shortly after first light. He walks the main lane, checks the legibility of marks on relevant doors, and confirms that shutters with required closures remain shut. If a mark has faded, he draws it again. If a household reports a change in status, he notes it and records the hour. He does not enter houses except by rule. He carries a board with the day's notices. These notices repeat the market hours, the opening and closing of specific lanes, and the arrangement for carts. He moves on without discussion. The crier will repeat the same notices aloud later. Breakfast is taken without ceremony. The pottage is served in bowls. Each person receives a portion in turn. Bread, if available, is cut and passed. The meal is eaten at the table. Conversation remains limited to necessary instructions for the day. After eating, bowls and cups are washed in hot water, and the washing water is stored for later floor wiping to avoid waste. The table is wiped again. The hearth is reduced to a steady, low flame to conserve fuel. The household reviews supplies. Grain, salt, oil, and fuel levels are checked against marks on the containers. If an item reaches the lower mark, it is added to the day's list. Coin is counted and placed in a cloth purse. If a purchase requires a voucher or a note from the supervisor, the note is prepared and set by the door. If nothing is needed, the list remains empty and the household stays within the rooms for the first half of the day. The aim is to avoid unnecessary movement. If there is a person under observation, The early hours include the first check of the day. The caregiver feels the forehead and chest, counts a short interval of breaths, and notes the result. If the person sleeps, the check is postponed to the next fixed time rather than repeated irregularly. Bedding in the separate space is adjusted and air is admitted for a brief interval if weather allows. The bucket and cloths are changed, and the used items are set aside for washing. The door to the space remains partly closed. Goods that arrived the day before and were set aside for rest are considered. If the required number of days has passed, a small fumigation is performed at the threshold or in a yard with a brazier and a covered frame. The time is counted, the smoke is allowed to settle, and the goods are moved inward. The wrapper is marked with the date. Items that have not completed the rest period remain at the perimeter and are recorded on a simple list to prevent accidental use. Street conditions are confirmed before any exit. A person looks from the doorway to check the lane. If the lane is clear and the hour falls within the permitted window, the planned errand proceeds. If a cart passes, the person waits until it clears the corner. If a marked door is visible, the route is changed to avoid passing close by. The watch patrol notes movement but does not interfere if papers are in order and the hour is correct. The person returns promptly and closes the door. By the second bell of the morning, most interior tasks are complete. The room is in order. Fuel for the midday boil is stacked near the hearth. Water for the day has been fetched and covered. Tools are ready for repair work or for tasks of the trade. Notes have been written for any required purchases. The health list has been updated with the first entries of the day. The household waits for the market hour or remains at work indoors according to plan. The early period ends without incident and passes into the next sequence of actions. Water for the day is obtained from public wells, fountains, or cisterns maintained by the ward, with rain barrels used where gutters allow collection. Access is regulated by posted hours. The well warden arrives first, checks the windlass, the rope, and the bucket, and notes the condition in a small book. A staff marks distance for those waiting. People stand at intervals, advance one place at a time, and keep to the right when leaving so the line does not cross itself. If a fountain is supplied by a conduit, a plug is removed at the start hour and replaced at the end. Breaks in the conduit are reported to the town clerk and entered on the board at the gate. Containers are prepared before leaving the house. Clay jars are inspected for cracks by tapping. Wooden buckets are checked for loose hoops. Leather bottles are pressed to look for leaks. Lids, stoppers, and ties are counted. A short tally is kept. Vessel type, capacity by customary measure, time of departure, time of return. The route to the water point is chosen to avoid marked doors and to keep within the permitted lanes. The person assigned to carry water takes a pass if the hour requires one and leaves promptly to reduce time outside. On arrival, the container mouth is wiped, the rope is guided to avoid fraying, and filling is done without dipping hands into the water. At home, water is handled in a fixed sequence. The first portion is set to heat for washing. The second portion is strained through a clean cloth to remove sediment. If the supply is known to be turbid after rain, the water is allowed to settle in a tall jar before use. A small amount of a sour mixture is prepared for wiping hands and rims of vessels. Boiling is done for a set span counted by the household. The pot is then removed and covered to cool without dust. Once cooled, water for drinking is poured into covered pitchers kept on a shelf away from the hearth. Pitchers are marked by day so that older water is used first. No vessel assigned to the sick room is used for the rest of the household. Wastewater is managed to limit carrying. Warm dishwater from breakfast is kept for floor wiping and for rinsing tools. After use, it is poured into a covered bucket and carried to the gutter at a time allowed by the ward rules. The path to the gutter is short and avoids the market front. Latrines are serviced on fixed days. Lime is measured by weight and sprinkled according to a standard quantity. The household notes when the next cart is expected for removal so that storage vessels are not overfilled. Fuel comes from several sources depending on region and ordinance. Firewood is the most common. It is sold in bundles of known size and stacked under cover to reduce damp. Charcoal is used where smoke must be limited. It is purchased in sacks and kept dry to prevent loss. Peat and turf are used where available and are dried before burning. Coal is permitted only in certain towns and is recorded with a separate duty. The quarter supervisor monitors prices posted by sellers and checks the measures used. Deliveries to houses are entered with date, quantity, and seller's mark. The day's use of fuel is planned in blocks. A small fire is kept for boiling water and for the morning pottage. Larger logs are reserved for midday cooking when heat is needed for a longer span. In the afternoon, the fire is allowed to decline to embers, and a brazier may be used for warmth in one corner to reduce overall consumption. If dough is to be taken to a public oven, the schedule is checked to prevent waiting at the door. Households contributing to the oven arrive at their assigned minute, hand over the marked loaf, and collect it at the posted return hour. Fuel for the oven is the baker's responsibility and is accounted separately. The hearth is prepared in a standard order. Ash from the previous day is raked forward and sifted. Unburned pieces are returned to the grate. Ash suitable for soap making or scouring is set aside in a dry box and labeled by date. The flue or hood is checked for soot accumulation. If a sweep is engaged, the appointment is made for a dry morning with windows open. Fire irons, trivets, and pot hooks are placed in the same arrangement each day to avoid burns and spills. A bucket filled with sand is kept nearby as a precaution. No illumination is placed over hanging fabrics. Lamp wicks are trimmed short to reduce smoke. Cutting and splitting wood are done at set hours to limit noise and contact. Logs are cut to lengths that fit the hearth. A chopping block is placed on firm ground, and children are kept inside during the task. Splits are stacked with spaces between rows to allow air to pass. The top of the stack is covered with boards to shed rain. If bundles arrive damp, they are set near but not on the hearth to dry slowly. The head of the household notes how long a bundle lasts under normal use, so that the next purchase is made before the store falls below the lower mark. Fuel allocation accounts for trade tasks. A smith, fuller, or dyer using heat records a separate supply and keeps it from the domestic pile. If the craft requires a continuous fire, the workday is planned to finish before evening signals so that the fire can be reduced under watch rules. If lime must be slaked, it is done outdoors and at a distance from doors and windows. The time and quantity are noted because the council inspects sites that generate fumes. Neighbors are informed of such work in advance to avoid unnecessary questions during patrols. Ventilation is adjusted to wind and temperature. In calm weather, a small opening in the shutter allows smoke to exit without drafts. In wind, the opening is moved to the leeward side or reduced to a slit. When boiling is prolonged, the door is set ajar for a short time while a person stands by to keep the threshold clear. Fabrics that must be aired are placed where smoke does not reach them directly. The aim is to maintain a clean room without wasting heat needed for cooking. Evening fuel use is strictly limited by ordinance. Curfew bells mark the time after which fires must be banked. The flame is covered with ash, the bar is set across the door, and lamps are reduced to the minimum required for movement within the room. The watch may look for light through shutters and ask for compliance if the glow is strong. The household keeps a record of any visit by the watch, noting the hour and the cause to avoid repeat corrections. Simple tools help maintain economy. A lid on the pot reduces fuel needed to keep a simmer. A trivet set at the correct height prevents scorching and allows even heating. Small kettles are used instead of large ones when only a small quantity is required. A fixed place for every item reduces time searching near the fire. When heat has finished its main task, remaining warmth is used for drying cloths or warming water for the next morning. No fuel is added after the evening meal unless the weather requires it. By late morning, the water supply for the day is secured, marked, and stored. Washing water has been used and disposed of according to rule. The hearth is steady and clean, and the wood pile shows a measured reduction consistent with the plan. Ash is contained and labeled. Records for purchases, deliveries, and inspections are current. With water and fuel in order, the household can proceed to market hours or to workshop tasks without interruption. Street use follows written ordinances issued by the council and copied to ward books. Each order carries a date, a serial mark, and the name of the clerk who wrote it. Boards with the current rules are fixed at the 4 main gates, the market cross, the bridgehead, and the porch of the town hall. The language is brief and uses the same phrases every time. Revisions are posted in the morning and remain until replaced. Fixed posts stand at predictable points. A watchman with a staff and a ledger keeps the gate, and a beadle walks the nearest 2 lanes. Reliefs occur at whole hours. A chalk or lime line marks where a person must wait to show papers. A bell at each post is used only to mark openings and closings, not to gather a crowd. Lanes are classified as closed, restricted, or transit only. Closed lanes are corded at both ends with a rope on pegs and a notice board. Restricted lanes allow passage during a posted window for residents with addresses inside the lane. Transit-only lanes allow movement in one direction along the right-hand side to shorten contact. Direction is indicated by a board with an arrow and a date. Door markings indicate health status for the purpose of routing. A simple shape in red or black paint is applied near the latch when a case is reported. The mark is repainted every 3 days to remain clear. Removal follows a recorded interval without signs and requires the supervisor's initial. Any smeared or altered mark is treated as tampering and entered with a fine. Passes are of limited types and carry short names: household errand pass, trade permit, medical summons, removal order, priest's list. Each pass states name, address, origin, destination, permitted lanes, and the exact hour window. A small seal in wax is pressed on the corner. Passes are carried visible at the belt or on a cord to reduce the time spent asking for them. Errand passes cover water, bread, and fuel. They allow a direct route to and from a well, a bakery, or a wood cellar at specified hours. Trade permits allow delivery of goods on a named cart by a named driver. Medical summons allow a physician, barber, surgeon, or watcher to pass at any hour named on the slip. Removal orders authorize a team to carry a body to the burial ground on the shortest allowed path. Cordons are set around groups of houses with multiple marks. Barrels filled with earth, stakes, and rope make a barrier with 2 controlled gaps. A small table stands beside each gap for ledgers and packages. Supplies are set on the table. The receiving household collects them after the watch steps back. Lists of addresses inside the cordon are fixed to the post and updated when persons move or die. Bridge and river landings have separate rules. A narrow path is marked for unloading, and bales remain on the quay until the airing time on their wrapper expires. Factors examine samples rather than opening whole packages. Boatmen present a paper from the last port with date and goods. No passenger comes ashore without a council mark. Market access is controlled by perimeter ropes that create one entrance and one exit. Stalls stand at fixed distances. Buyers enter at the first bell and leave by the second, with a short gap before the next group. Weighers check bread and measures and write down fines on a separate sheet. Persons who do not need to buy that day remain away to keep the count within limits. Curfew rules define the evening. A bell sounds to bank fires and reduce light. Only watchmen, physicians on summons, removal teams, and priests on call may be in the lanes after the second bell. Household shutters close. Lamps are covered so that light does not show through cracks. The watch notes any open window or strong glow and requests correction without delay. Inspection proceeds in known steps. The watchman greets at a distance, asks for the pass, reads the hour, and compares lanes listed. If the paper is correct, the person moves on without delay. If the paper is wrong, the person returns by the shortest route. The beadle writes the name and address if known and the reason for refusal. No long talk occurs. Penalties are standard and posted. First offenses receive a warning entered in the ledger. Second offenses draw a small fine collected at the town hall in the afternoon. Third offenses may require a day of confinement at home certified by the quarter supervisor. Tampering with door marks or breaking a cordon rope brings an immediate fine at the upper rate. Appeals occur at a fixed table in the town hall on 2 afternoons each week. A clerk receives the pass, listens to a short statement, and writes a note to the ward if a correction is justified. If not, the entry stands. The ledger uses a simple column layout: date, name, address, type of pass, action taken, fine if any, clerk's mark. The same format repeats each week to keep comparisons easy. Children and animals are included in the rules to reduce movement. Children remain within door and yard during market hours. pigs and poultry are kept inside small courts and not driven through lanes except on slaughter days at the posted hour. Larger animals move with a drover and a pass on days when lanes are not restricted. Droppings are removed by the owner before the next bell. Signage is clear and limited. Boards use large letters and a short list of items. Hours, lanes open, lanes closed, pass types allowed, next change time. Red paint signals closures, black paint signals openings and hours. Flags on a short pole at corners show wind direction for smoke and dust control. No other notices are allowed on the same posts. Weather changes adjust the schedule without changing the rules. Heavy rain can delay the opening of certain lanes to avoid slips, and the delay is written on the board with a short note. Frost can change a transit-only lane to closed until sand is thrown. High wind can move the market to a lee street. These changes are temporary and timed. Fire and accident procedures remain in force. If a fire is seen, the nearest watch post is notified, and the cordon is lifted on the shortest path for the bucket line only. The beadle records the minutes from alarm to first water. After the fire is out, the cordon returns to its previous line, and the record is closed with the hour. If a cart breaks an axle and blocks a lane, a rope diverts movement until the cart is moved. Doorway practice reduces contact. Deliveries stop at the sill. The person knocks, steps back 2 paces and waits. The receiving person lifts the package, signs a short strip if required, and closes the door. Tools and coins are placed on a cloth to reduce handling. The clerk's instruction sheets repeat this sequence and include no other steps. Physicians and priests carry lists rather than ordinary passes. A physician's list names households by address, with lines to mark the hour of entry and exit. A priest's list includes requested visits for sacraments with the hour noted and the result entered in one word. Both lists serve as permission ends at the last entry of the day. The watch does not delay these persons unless an error is visible on the page. Removal teams use a fixed route to the burial ground. The bier or cart is covered. The team wears a sign on the shoulder for identification and carries a paper with address, hour of collection, and destination. The path avoids market fronts. At the gate, the watch writes the time. At the burial ground, the keeper writes the time again. The ledger entry is complete when both marks appear. Records support the rules. Each ward keeps a patrol sheet with columns for hours, locations, names checked, refusals, warnings, and fines. Weekly returns reach the town clerk on the same day, and totals are read aloud at the council's short session. If totals rise, the council can shorten market hours or add a rope line to reduce crossings. If totals fall for several weeks, a lane can move from closed to restricted. The cordon remains until the last mark on the door list is removed on schedule. When a cordon lifts, the barriers are taken to a yard and stacked by type. The posts are counted and tied in bundles. The rope is examined and rolled. The ward book receives a closing note with dates, counts, and a short comment on compliance. Then the lane returns to ordinary status under general rules. By late morning, street movement follows these controls with few changes. Persons with passes complete their errands. Cordon tables receive and release packages without delay. The watch makes notes without extended stops. The lanes remain clear of gatherings. The city keeps to its schedule, and the day proceeds to market hours under the same measures. Market hours are fixed on the board and follow the bells. The entry rope opens at the first bell, closes at the second, and reopens after a short gap for the next group. Each ward receives a window with a letter and a color mark. Persons arrive from their ward during that window only. One person per household enters unless a trade permit states otherwise. The entry steward notes the hour, counts entrance, and compares the count with the ward list. Stalls are arranged at measured intervals. Bread stands occupy the east side, grain sellers the north, grocers and oil on the west, and fish and meat on the south under shade. The weighing table stands in the center, with the assize board behind it. All measures on the table match the town standards. Stones for weights, nested cups for volume, a metal L for cloth, and a rod for cord lengths. Inspectors compare the seller's weights against the town stones at the start of each session and again at random. Prices are posted in whole amounts for common loaves, grain by peck, beans and peas by weight, oil by the pint, vinegar by the same, and salt by a fixed scoop. Bread sizes are limited to a small and a large loaf, each stamped before baking with a mark that identifies the baker. The bread assize sets the weight for the price, and the inspector checks by cutting one loaf per stall, weighing it, and entering the result. If a loaf is short, a fine is written on the sheet and paid at the town hall in the afternoon. If several loaves are short, the stall closes for that session. Entry practice is constant. The line advances one person at a time. Passes are shown without conversation. Coin is kept in a cloth purse and is counted on a small square of cloth on the stall board. Change is placed back on the cloth. No touching of goods occurs until the seller lays them out. No tasting is permitted. If a container is needed, the buyer supplies it. Paper or large leaves are used only for dry goods. Liquids go into stoppered jars brought from home. Quantities per household are limited by posted lines. Bread may be bought in 2 large loaves or 4 small loaves per day. Grain is limited to a set portion per week unless the household presents a note for a larger number of persons. Beans and peas follow a smaller daily limit to keep stocks even. Oil is limited to 1 small flask per entry. Vinegar is sold in small measures for cleaning and for food. Salt is rationed by households registered at the ward. The steward marks the salt column when the scoop is delivered. Grain sellers operate with sacks set on trestles. The seller opens a sack, skims stones and chaff at the top if present, and measures with the official cup. If rain has been heavy, the inspector checks for damp at the bottom with his hand. Damp grain is held back until it has aired. Buyers accept mixed grain when stocks are low and note the mix for their own grinding. The miller's schedule is posted at the same board as the bread hours to prevent gatherings at the mill door. Fish and preserved goods follow their own routine. Fresh river fish arrive early and are laid on clean boards with a thin layer of damp cloth beneath. Salted and smoked fish remain in barrels and are lifted with a hook. The inspector notes the smell and the firmness and rejects soft pieces. On fast days, the fish line is longer, the ropes retain the same pattern and the same spacing. Buyers bring flat baskets with cloths to cover the fish and prevent flies. Excess stock at the end of the second session goes to the hospital kitchen at a fixed price, entered in a separate column. Meat appears on permitted days only. Slaughter occurs outside the walls at the appointed yard. A beadle checks the hides and offal removal before carts enter the gate. Meat is cut to standard joints and weighed. Offal is sold early with lime buckets placed nearby for spills. Bones and tallow are collected in marked tubs for chandlers. If heat is strong, meat sales close at the first bell only. Any remainder is boiled at the yard or salted. No private slaughter within lanes is allowed. Fines are posted on the board and repeated by the crier. Dairy is limited to an early window. Milk is sold near the west side under shade and must be strained into the buyer's vessels. Watering is punished by an immediate fine. Inspectors float a small rod in the milk to test density according to practice. Curds and soft cheeses appear in small rounds wrapped in cloth. Hard cheeses are cut with a wire and weighed. Butter is uncommon in warm weather and, when present, is wrapped and carried in covered pots. Greens, roots, and herbs arrive from gardens just outside the walls. Sellers present bundles in even counts. Soil is shaken off at a spot marked for waste near the south rope. The beadle sweeps the area after each group. Roots are sold by count rather than weight to reduce time at the scale. Herbs are tied in small bunches for broths and for simple washings. If supply is large, prices fall in the afternoon session and the change is chalked on the stall board. Grocers keep small goods, salt, spice remnants, dried fruit, lamp oil. These are kept behind the board and are issued by the spoon or small scoop. Lamp oil is counted apart from food oil and marked with a different paint on the jar. Vinegar stands in tall jars with taps. The inspector checks that taps are closed between buyers. Honey, when available, is skimmed from the top of jars and wrapped for transport in the buyer's pot. No shared spoons are used. Sellers wipe their own utensils between measures. Assistance for the poor is organized and visible. A table near the market cross holds tokens issued by ward supervisors. Each token exchanges for a small loaf or a measure of pottage at the hospital kitchen. The line forms at the second bell after ordinary buyers. Names are read from a list and marked. Donated goods, if any, are recorded by weight and by donor. At the end of the day, the steward totals the tokens and reports to the town clerk. The process is brief and uses few words. Movement within the market is one way. Buyers enter at the north rope, circle past bread, grain, grocers, and then fish and meat, and exit at the south rope. Turning back is not allowed. A person who forgets an item must re-enter in the next session. The space between stalls remains clear. Carts move only on the outer ring. If a bale falls, the seller lifts it alone, no group forms. The watch writes the time of any interruption longer than 1 minute. Paper records remain simple. Each stall keeps a tally by strokes bundled into fives. The inspector's sheet lists stall name, scale check times, short loaves, damp grain, fines, and remarks. The entry steward's sheet lists ward windows, counts, refusals, and times. At the close of the day, sheets go to the town hall. Totals are read in a short session. If a shortage is visible, The council may reduce limits the next day to spread supply. Wrapping and carrying follow fixed steps. Bread goes into cloth sacks brought from home. Grain goes into tied bags or jars with stoppers. Fish and meat are wrapped in cloth with a second cloth layer if the weather is warm. Oil and vinegar jars receive a string through the stopper. Coins and notes are kept in a purse separate from food. Buyers do not stop in the lane outside. They carry goods home by the direct route and close the door. Cleanliness is maintained with regular actions. Spills are covered with sand and swept to marked spots. Rinse water is carried to a corner barrel. The weighing table is wiped after each session with warm water from a kettle. Hands are wiped with the sour mixture by sellers when moving from one product to another. The same cloths are used for boards and then are boiled at the end of the day. Flies are reduced by covering foods and by clearing waste often. Communication is brief and uniform. Sellers call no prices. Prices are posted and stable. Buyers state quantities and present containers. Inspectors speak in set phrases. Show weight, short by this, entry noted. Disputes go to the clerk's table after the session, not during it. The clerk hears one sentence from each side, writes a word on the sheet, and sets a time for resolution if needed. Most entries end with settled or fine paid. Weather alters timing but not order. Heavy rain moves the fish stalls under the bridge roof. Ropes are shifted to keep the circle. Heat shortens meat hours and increases vinegar sales. Frost delays opening. Sand is thrown on the main path and the hour is written on the board. Wind from a certain quarter closes one entrance and opens another to reduce dust on the weighing table. Changes are marked with a new date. By late morning, the first 2 sessions have ended. Households carry bread, grain, and small goods home. Fines are tallied. The ropes are lifted for a short cleaning and then set down for the afternoon. Sellers adjust stock and note what must be prepared for the next day. The market space remains clear of gatherings. With provisioning complete for most households, the day moves toward workshop tasks and the midday meal according to schedule. Work proceeds under written adjustments that keep tasks separate, shorten contact, and preserve records. Guild ordinances remain in force where applicable, with temporary clauses copied onto addenda sheets and pinned beside shop doors. Each clause carries a date, a title line, and an expiry note. Quarter supervisors collect short returns every week. Number of active hands, hours worked, materials received, and deliveries made. The council reads totals in a brief sitting and issues corrections by the same route. Workdays begin after the first market window. Crafts that require heat or water plan start time so that boiling, dyeing, or fulling do not coincide with inspections or curfew bells. Shops leave shutters open enough for light and air but keep benches inward to prevent gathering near the threshold. Tools are set on boards in the same order each day to cut down handling. Apprentices sweep before the first operation and keep brooms, sand, and buckets at fixed points. Guild rules limit shared equipment. Smiths use individual hammers, tongs, and chisels marked with notches. Only the anvil and bellows are shared. Fullers schedule troughs by the hour and draw off water between uses. Dyers assign vats by color and day. No mixing occurs within the same morning. Weaver's space looms so that a person can pass without brushing clothing. Tailors and cobblers take measurements by eye and use a wooden rule, avoiding direct contact when writing orders. The addenda sheets specify cleaning between uses with warm water or a sour solution and list the sequence to reduce missed steps. Piecework and homework expand to reduce shop density. Spinners, seamers, carders, and certain woodworkers take measured bundles home with a tally slip. The slip lists material type, count, and the date for return. On return, finished pieces are set on a board outside the shop and checked against the slip. Payment is marked in strokes on the slip and in the master's ledger. Defects are noted in one word, and the piece is either reworked or set aside for later trimming. This system keeps movement short and avoids long stays indoors. Delivery routines follow the doorway practice described earlier. Carriers set goods on the sill, step back, and wait for acknowledgement. If a signature is needed, the buyer marks a short strip with name or sign and the hour. Carts carrying bulk materials stop at designated sheds rather than at shop doors. Sacks and bales remain there until the airing time on their wrapper expires. Factors meet at the shed table to weigh, count, and cut samples. The beadle keeps a list of which shops are due to collect which bundles and notes when a bundle passes inward. Municipal duties supplement trade. Each ward assigns able residents to a set of tasks on a rotation: street sweeping, sand spreading on frost, gutter clearing, bundle carrying to sheds, and lime scattering at marked spots. The rotation is written on a board kept by the supervisor and copied to 2 slips, one for the household, one for the beadle. Tasks are simple and timed. A person reports to the tool rack, receives a broom, shovel, or bucket with a number mark, completes the route, returns the tool, and receives a notch on a small token. Tokens are counted every fortnight. Missing counts draw a warning. Water carriers and wood porters operate under similar controls. The ward sets hours when porters may pass with yokes. Loads are measured by custom units and priced on posted tables. Porters carry a cord with knots to tally trips. The supervisor inspects cords in the evening to confirm totals. Payment occurs at a fixed table, and the porter's name is checked against a list. Porters who also serve cordoned lanes use tables at the barrier gaps. They set the load down, step back, and wait until the watch waves them on. Hospital and kitchen support tasks are staffed by rotation and by paid hires. Bread, grain, and rejected market fish move to the hospital kitchen at fixed hours. Cooks keep short recipes that use steady measures and long boils. Cleaners wipe boards and handles in a set order. Watchers assigned to the sick wards keep hourly notes: name, condition, food taken, water taken, and changes. Supplies are issued against tokens to prevent overuse. When a shift ends, the watcher signs the line and leaves the tab with the next watcher. Record keeping remains strict to prevent disputes. Every shop ledger uses the same columns: date, item, quantity, measure, price, name, and remark. Every civic duty sheet uses hour, location, tool number, and initials of the beadle. Weekly returns from wards reach the town clerk on the same weekday, and totals are read aloud and entered into the main book. If a craft's output drops below a stated line, the council may permit extended hours for that craft under watch. If a duty falls behind, the council shifts hands from a less urgent duty to restore balance. Payment practices are simplified. Coin is counted on a cloth to avoid rolling and is wrapped in paper strips by fixed sums. For larger accounts, merchants use tallies cut in two. One half remains with the payer, one with the payee. On settlement, halves are matched. Workmen and women are paid daily or weekly as agreed. Entries carry only names, amounts, and marks for absence. Fines from market short waits and lane breaches are recorded in a separate column and paid at the town hall. The beadle brings a copy of fines to the ward board so totals are visible. Apprenticeship continues with changes. Formal instruction at guild halls is suspended. Masters assign reading at home from primers where available. Tasks are limited to errands within a known perimeter: tool cleaning, straight cutting, and simple assembly. Assessments are short and written. Masters write 2 or 3 lines each week to the supervisor stating progress and any illness in the household. When an apprentice falls ill, the entry moves to the health list and duties pause without penalty. Repair and maintenance receive priority over new work. Roof patching, shutter mending, hinge setting, and cartwheel tightening are scheduled first. Work requiring entry into a client's house is avoided. If entry is necessary, the craftsperson stands near the door, the client stands away, and instructions are given in short phrases. Payment is left on a cloth, counted aloud and wrapped. If a measurement must be taken, it is taken in whole units with a wooden rod. Fine adjustment is left to the shop bench. Work orders that do not affect weatherproofing or safety are postponed until restrictions ease. Travel for work between wards is limited to those with trade permits. The permit states the origin, destination, route, and hour band. Porters, factors, physicians, and certain artisans such as sweeps and masons carry these permits. The watch checks the permit at lane posts. If the hour has slipped, the person returns by the shortest route. Late returns are entered in the ward book and counted at week's end. Repeated late returns reduce future permit hours for that household. Safety routines inside shops follow the same order each day. Hands are washed at start, after handling money, before handling food, and at midday. Cloths for wiping benches are boiled at day's end. Tools are dipped or wiped with warm water between uses. Windows are opened by a set amount and closed after a measured interval. The hearth or brazier is kept to the smallest flame needed for the task. The bucket of sand stands at the same place. No shared cups are kept. Each person brings a vessel and uses only that vessel. Street maintenance continues under ward direction. Sweepers move sand to cover damp spots and remove refuse to marked piles. Gutter clearers work with hooks and shovels along fixed runs, starting at the upper end and moving down. Waste carts operate on alternate days. The beadle times how long a pile stands before removal and records delays. When frost occurs, sand spreading begins before first bell. When heat is strong, sweeping moves to early hours to limit dust. If the wind changes and blows dust toward the market, the route is altered and noted on the sheet. Communication about work uses brief signals. A mark on a shop shutter shows open, closed, or deliveries only. A strip of cloth in a set color fastened near the latch indicates that orders can be left at the sill. No shouting for customers is allowed. A crier announces only civic changes, altered hours, closed lanes, or cordons. Notices carry dates and short headings for indexing in the clerk's book. Trades rely on posted lists and pre-arranged writing rather than on speech in the lane. Obligations for households unable to work are recorded for ration support. The ward keeps a list of houses with illness or confinement and assigns reduced duties such as making cord, twisting wicks, or sorting beans at home. Tokens for the hospital kitchen are issued according to that list. When the household recovers, the supervisor writes a re-entry note and schedules light outdoor tasks first, returning to ordinary rotation after a week without changes on the health list. Work pauses at midday for a short meal and airing, then resumes in a reduced form in the afternoon. Tasks that generate heat or fumes are finished first to allow embers to decline before curfew. Delivery of finished goods occurs in the earlier half of the afternoon to avoid crowding near the curfew hour. Piecework is bundled and labeled for the next morning. Ledgers are balanced and slips are stacked for the beadle's pickup if due that day. By late afternoon, obligations are complete or moved to the next day's list. Tools are put away in the same order they were taken out. Floors are swept and wiped with the saved dishwater. Ash is banked. The shop shutter closes to the usual width, and a strip shows the status for the morning. The ward board receives any notes of shortage or delay. With work and duties logged and the records current, the household prepares for the evening restrictions and the meal that follows. Council decisions move to the public as short notices. The town clerk drafts each notice from the council minute. The draft uses a fixed template: header line, subject, scope, wards affected, start hour, end hour or duration, authority, penalty if any, and clerk's name. Each notice receives a serial mark for the week and a running number for the year. Ink is black for ordinary changes and red for closures and cordons. The seal is pressed at the lower left. Dates are written in full to avoid error. A fair copy is made on stiff paper for each posting place. Smaller slips go to ward supervisors, gatepost, and the beadle's bag. The clerk also writes a crier's strip with the same text in short lines. No additions or explanations appear on the strip. If a notice replaces an earlier one, the word replaces and the serial of the earlier notice appear in the margin. If a notice expires by hour, the expiry is underlined. Boards stand at fixed points. Each main gate, the market cross, the bridgehead, the church porch, and the town hall door. Boards are planed wood with a narrow frame and 4 nail points. A shallow lip at the top sheds rain. The beadle carries nails, a small hammer, and a knife to lift old sheets. Sheets are placed at even height so that crier and watch can point to the same line. Chalk lines mark spaces for daily items such as hours and lane classes. Distribution begins after first light. A clerk's runner carries bundles in a basket with divisions by ward. The beadle accompanies the runner to the first 2 boards, then continues with ward copies. The runner returns for a second bundle if the day is heavy. The quarter supervisor receives his copy, signs the margin, and pins a duplicate on the ward board. The watch at each gate signs a short ledger to confirm posting. Signatures are short symbols when names are not common. The crier reads the text at set corners in order: Town Hall, Market Cross, Bridgehead, North Gate, East Gate, South Gate, West Gate. Readings occur shortly after posting, again at midday if there is a change, and before curfew if hours shift. The crier speaks in the same phrases as the sheet and does not add words. After reading, he points to the board and moves on. A boy carries the bell and rings once before each reading. There is no call to assemble. Subjects fall into standard groups. Market, opening and closing times, stall spacing, bread assize weight, meat days, fish hours, dairy windows. Movement, lanes closed, lanes restricted, transit only direction, pass types allowed, curfew times. Health, door marks, quarantine days, cordons set or lifted, fumigation points, hospital kitchen hours, watches shifts. Work, guild addenda in force, chimney sweep routes, gutter clearing runs, sand spreading times. Supply, well maintenance, fountain plug hours, conduit breaks, wood prices posted, lime delivery days. Each group has a short heading to ease copying into ward books. Numbers are exact and round. Times are whole hours. Measures use the town standard only. Words are brief: open, close, short, fine, warned, paid, lifted, set, delay, sand, rain. To help those who do not read letters, a small mark sits at the head of each subject. A circle for markets, a bar for movement, a cross stroke for health, a square for work, a triangle for supply. Red paint appears only for closures and cordons. Corrections use a slip pinned over the line to be changed. The slip carries the same serial mark with the letter A, B, or C for the first, second, or third correction. The crier reads the correction once at the next round. At the town hall, the clerk rewrites the full notice if the correction is not clear and pulls the old sheet. The pulled sheet goes into a bundle tied by day and stored on a shelf. The shelf is marked by week and then by month. Appeals to a notice go through a short form. The petitioner writes name, address, notice serial, line in question, and reason in one sentence. The clerk reads the form in the afternoon at a fixed table. If the form shows an error of hour or measure, the clerk writes a correction on a slip and pins it at the board. If the form concerns hardship, the council hears it at the next short sitting and either writes a temporary pass rule or leaves the notice as is. The decision is a new line on the board with the word permits or refuses. Ward supervisors copy notices into their books. Each entry uses columns: date, serial, subject, wards, start, end, clerk, remarks. If a ward adds a local note, the note goes in the remarks column with initials. Gate ledgers show 3 items for each posting: time pinned, watchman's mark, and time removed or replaced. A weekly return from wards goes to the town clerk's table with totals: how many closures, how many cordons, how many changes to hours, and how many fines connected to notices. Special orders use a different form when time is short. Narrow sheet carries a single instruction such as close south lane until sand thrown, or move fish stalls under bridge roof for rain. The sheet bears a red notch at the top and the clerk's mark. The crier reads it on his next pass only once. When the cause ends, the beadle removes the sheet and writes ended with the hour on the back. The sheet goes into the day bundle. Seals and inks are kept in a small chest in the clerk's room. The chest holds 2 seals, a wax pot, 2 ink pots, quills, knives, and a ruler. Red wax is kept separate from black. The chest is locked. The key hangs on a hook. When wax is low, the clerk writes a line in the supply book. When quills blunt, they are cut on a board at the window. The room is aired each morning so sheets dry flat and the ink does not smear. Tampering is recorded and fined. If a sheet is torn, the beadle writes a line in his ledger with time and place and pins a new copy. If a mark is smudged, he rewrites it in the same hand. If a board is defaced, the watch cleans it with a cloth and note is made to plane or replace it. Fines for tearing are posted on the board in black. The watch avoids long stops at the board and notes the event on patrol return. Outlying hamlets receive copies by messenger. The messenger carries a packet with the same sheets and a short cover line listing the serials. He signs the outbook with time of departure and returns with signatures from the hamlet reeve or mark if no writing is used there. If bridges are out, the messenger leaves copies at the ferry house and writes "left at ferry" on the outbook line. Hamlet boards stand at the chapel door or bakehouse wall and use the same signs. Neighbor towns exchange notices on fixed days. Each side sends a brief table of current cordons, market days, and water interruptions. Traders read these tables at the shed and plan routes accordingly. The town clerk files foreign tables in a separate folder and writes the date on the cover. Differences in measures are noted in the margin to prevent confusion. Records are maintained by simple counts. The clerk keeps a daybook, pages numbered, 1 day per page, with columns for posted, corrected, replaced, and expired. At the end of the week, he bundles sheets by day and writes totals on the last page. At the end of the month, he ties the bundles and places them on the shelf under that month's board. When the shelf fills, older bundles move to a chest in the storeroom. The storeroom remains dry and is checked after rain. Language remains uniform. Notices use the town tongue with a few fixed Latin words in the header for legal force, as the custom requires. Spelling and phrasing do not vary between scribes. A small board with sample lines hangs over the clerk's table to keep forms the same. Numerals remain Arabic or Roman according to existing practice. The same style is used on all boards within a week. Interaction with passes is direct. Many notices name the pass types allowed during a window. The pass list is printed at the bottom line of the sheet in this order: household, trade, medical, removal, priest. The watch points to that line when checking belts and cords at the rope. When a new pass type is introduced for a day, such as sand spreaders during frost, the line includes it and the pass slip bears a matching letter for the day. Idle questions at boards are discouraged. A short note at the top of each board states, "Read." Follow. Ask at ward board. The beadle answers only whether a sheet is current and where to find a ward board. Clerks do not discuss reasons at the board. If a person cannot read, the crier is the channel, and the person listens to the next round. In practice, people learn which marks match which subjects and move accordingly. Illness tallies appear in a separate list at 2 boards only: town hall and church porch. The list shows wards in a column with counts of new marks, marks removed, and total undermark. No names appear. The list is updated once each day after the quarter supervisors send their numbers. The crier does not read this list aloud. The aim is record, not display. The burial ground keeper posts his own small sheet at the gate, opening hour, closing hour, and path for the removal team. When ground shifts from one trench to another, the sheet adds a line "New trench from this date." When a trench closes, the sheet says "Closed at this date." The watch writes the hour of each bier that passes and tallies the day at close. The keeper's sheet is removed each morning and rewritten if there is a change. When water supply alters, the fountain or well carries a tag tied to the upright. Plug at hour, plug off at hour, rope changed, windlass inspected. The well warden initials the tag. The town board repeats the time so the line remains short. If a conduit breaks, the notice names the street where the break lies and the day when carts will not pass. At day's end, boards are checked for loose nails, torn corners, and smudged ink. The beadle presses corners flat and replaces nails if needed. The crier returns the bell and the strip to the clerk. The clerk marks which sheets expire at curfew and writes new hour lines for the morning if the council has ordered a change. The door of the clerk's room is barred. The watch notes boards checked in the patrol book. This notice system keeps movement, trade, and care within known limits. Text is short, times are exact, and places are fixed. Copies go to the same points every day. Corrections follow a simple path. Records collect in uniform tables. The next part returns to household practice with hygiene and handling of goods, which proceeds within the rules set on these boards. Household hygiene follows a fixed order that repeats each day. Tasks occur at the same hours to reduce confusion and to separate actions that use water, heat, and open air. The sequence begins after early washing and runs until the midday pause, with a shorter round in late afternoon. Tools and materials are kept in known places. A chest for cloths, a shelf for jars, a peg for brushes, a hook for the bucket, and a small board that lists the order of steps. Surfaces are wiped from cleanest to dirtiest to prevent recontamination. Shelves and the table receive a cloth moistened with warm water. The cloth is wrung until it does not drip. A second pass uses a weak sour mixture prepared in a small bowl. The bowl is marked with a notch, so it is never confused with a food vessel. Handles, latches, and the bar of the door are wiped next. The inner sill and the area of the floor where parcels rest are wiped last. Cloths used for these points are set aside in a basket labeled house, not sick room, and will be boiled together. Air is admitted by measure rather than by feel. The shutter opens to a set width. A weight on a string serves as a timer, and then the shutter closes. In cold weather, airing occurs in shorter intervals, repeated more often. In heat, airing occurs in longer intervals, fewer times. Windows on opposite sides are not opened at the same time to avoid drafts strong enough to disturb dust. Bedding is placed near the window only during an airing interval and is returned to its place when the shutter closes. Cloths are assigned by person and task and are marked to avoid mixing. Household cloths for surfaces have a small cut at one corner. Cloths for hands have 2 stitches in colored thread. Cloths for dishes have a small knot. Cloths for the sick room carry a distinct mark and never touch common shelves. After use, each cloth goes to the correct basket. House, hands, dishes, sick room. Baskets stand on separate pegs to keep the sets apart until boiling. Boiling follows a fixed schedule, once after the morning round, once before evening. A large pot is filled to 3/4 with water. The pot stands on a trivet to allow even heat. Cloths go in according to basket, never mixed, and are pressed below the surface with a stick reserved for this task. Boil time is counted with a sand glass or by strokes on a board. When done, cloths cool in the pot are lifted with tongs and are hung where smoke will not touch them. The stick and tongs are then wiped and placed on their hook. The sour mixture is prepared fresh each morning. Water is warmed and a small measured quantity of vinegar is added. The household uses the same measure daily to keep strength constant. The bowl is covered with a cloth when not in use. At midday, the bowl is emptied and rinsed. A new batch is mixed if needed for the afternoon. No batch carries over to the next day. The bowl itself is washed with hot water and set to dry on its side so no residue remains. Dishes and utensils are washed in 2 steps. A first wash uses warm water with a small amount of ash or soap scrap to cut grease. A second rinse uses hot water alone. Wooden boards are not soaked. They are scraped and wiped, then set upright to dry. Metal knives are wiped and dried immediately to prevent rust. Pot hooks and trivets are wiped when cool and placed in a set order on their pegs. No utensil from the sick room enters the common wash. Those items use their own basin and are dried in the separate space. Floor care proceeds by section. The area near the hearth is swept first and then wiped with Save dishwater. The area near the door is swept next and wiped with water prepared for this purpose. The area under the table is last. Waste is gathered into a covered bucket. The bucket is carried to the gutter only at the hour allowed by ward rule. If the day is not a removal day, the bucket remains covered in the yard. Lime for latrine and waste points is measured with the same scoop each time and is recorded on a small tally by strokes. Laundry is organized to reduce handling. Common clothes are brushed, aired, and folded for longer intervals between full washes. Undergarments and cloths that touch the skin are washed more often. Washes are grouped by fabric to match boiling time and drying time. A washing day is set so that boiling, wringing, hanging, and retrieval are finished before curfew. Lines are strung in the yard where possible. In shared yards, lines are assigned by hour. In wet weather, clothes hang on poles indoors with space between to allow air to pass. If a garment must enter the sick room, it is marked and later washed in the sick room batch. Goods entering the house follow a reception procedure at the threshold. A mat or cloth lies just inside the door. Parcels rest on the mat while the wrapper is checked for the mark that shows the end of the airing period. If the mark shows the end date has passed, the wrapper is opened and folded for removal or reuse. If the mark shows time remains, the parcel stays wrapped and rests in a corner set aside for pending goods. The house keeps a small list of such parcels with the date and hour when each will move inward. Small fumigations are performed for named goods only. A covered frame stands ready near the door. A brazier sits below the frame on a tile. The parcel rests on slats under the cover, and a measured quantity of fuel produces steady, not large, smoke. Time is counted. When finished, the cover is lifted away from the face, the smoke disperses, and the goods return to the pending corner or move inward according to the mark. The brazier ash is cooled, then placed in a metal pan until fully cold. The pan returns to its hook. Pests are managed by steady prevention rather than chase. Flour and grain rest in jars with tight stoppers. Jars are labeled with the date the contents were poured in, so older grain is used first. Cloth sacks stand on boards, not on the floor. Dried herbs hang in small bundles in a dry place. Shelves are wiped weekly with warm water and allowed to dry before jars return. Traps stand along walls where droppings are seen. Traps are checked at the same hour each day. The catch is removed without display and the trap is reset. Personal items remain separate. Combs, razors, and small mirrors have places in a box. No item is shared across persons. The box is wiped outside and inside once a week. A basin for face washing is assigned per person or per pair and marked. Basins sit on a shelf when dry. They are not stacked wet. The towel per person rule remains in force. Towels carry the 2-stitch mark and are washed on the set days. The sick room operates on a stricter plan. The door or screen remains partly closed except during airing. A small window opens by the same measure as in the common room and closes after the timer falls. Water for the sick room is heated and carried in a dedicated pitcher. The pitcher never leaves the room except for washing. Dishes for the sick room use a separate basin and a separate cloth. The caregiver washes hands at entry and exit using the sick room bowl and cloth. Notes on the person's state are written after each check and placed under a stone at the foot of the bed. Visitor handling to the door is reduced to a short exchange. A knock sounds. The person inside steps back 2 paces. The door opens a hand's width, and a parcel or note is set on the sill. The door closes. The person returns, opens the parcel on the mat, and proceeds according to the mark. Coins are left on a cloth, counted, and lifted after the cloth is folded. No items pass directly from hand to hand. This rule applies to all, including officials if papers allow a door approach. Heat and steam are managed so that cleaning does not interfere with cooking. Boils for cloths occur after breakfast wash-up and before the midday cook, or later in the afternoon after the main meal. The fire is built small and steady. Lids stay on pots to reduce fuel. A sand bucket and a wooden lid for the hearth stand nearby. No drying cloths hang over open flame. When a boiling session ends, the hearth is kept low and the room is aired for a counted interval. Storage follows older first to avoid waste. Bread for the day sits in a cloth bag on the coolest shelf. Grain jars line up by date marks facing outward. Oil and vinegar jars stand apart from food to prevent spills on flour or bread. Soap scraps dry on a little board and are added to the wash water when enough has collected. Ash from the hearth goes to a dry box marked by day. The older ash is used for scouring or making lye. The newer ash is left to dry. Nothing stands on the floor where water might run. Records stay simple so they can be kept daily. A narrow strip on the wall lists tasks in order with small squares for checks. The strip has lines for airing done, surfaces wiped, cloths boiled, house, cloths boiled, sick room, dishes washed, floor wiped, bucket covered, latrine limed, and pending parcels checked. The strip resets each morning. If a task is delayed, a dot marks the line to remind the household to complete it before curfew. Weather changes affect timing but not the sequence. In rain, airing intervals shorten and boil times move earlier. In frost, cloth drying uses poles indoors and takes longer. The second boiling may be moved to the next day if needed, but never beyond that. In heat, fish and meat wrappers open only when necessary and are returned quickly to cool places. The board by the door carries these adjustments as one-line notes for the day, so no one relies on memory. Children and older persons receive clear roles within capacity. Children carry folded cloths from peg to peg and count strokes on the tally while an adult wipes. Older persons sort dry cloths into baskets and mark the wall strip with a line when a task finishes. If the household is reduced by illness, tasks contract to the minimal set: hands, surfaces most touched, dishes, the sill, the bucket, and the latrine. The rest pause until help arrives or strength returns. By the end of the afternoon round, the house shows signs of ordered care rather than finish or shine. Cloths hang with space between, jars sit closed, the mat at the door is clean, and the baskets stand with lids. The tally on the wall shows a full set of marks. The sick room list holds 2 or 3 new lines with times. The hearth is low, the brazier is cool, and the window stands at the evening opening for the last measured interval. The household closes shutters at the hour, places tools back on their hooks, and keeps the room ready for the next day's sequence without change. Contact between households is kept brief, spaced, and recorded. Neighbors use the doorway method for all exchanges. A knock sounds. The delivering person steps back 2 paces. The door opens to a hand's width, and the parcel rests on the sill. Words are few and functional: name, item, and hour. If acknowledgement is needed, the receiver places a short strip with a mark on the sill after closing the door. The giver retrieves it and leaves. No hands meet. The sequence repeats without variation to keep memory and movement simple. Requests for assistance are made with visible, fixed signs rather than long speech. A strip of cloth tied to the latch with a knot outward means water carrier needed when permitted hour begins. A strip with no knot means fuel porter requested at next window. A small flat stone set on the sill with a scored line denotes message enclosed, and a folded paper lies under it. The quarter supervisor instructs wards to use these signs so that watchmen can identify purpose at a glance. The signs do not change color or shape from day to day. Information moves along the lane at set times to avoid clustering. After the first market window, households open shutters to the standard width and speak across the lane in short phrases about hours, pass windows, and any change in cordon lines. No calls extend beyond a few words. If a person misses the exchange, the quarter supervisor's midday round covers the same items. In lanes near cordons, the watch repeats board lines once per bell and points to the barrier table where written copies lie under a small weight. Neighbor help follows a rotation kept on a narrow board at the supervisor's door. Each day's board lists 2 or 3 simple tasks: carrying water for a confined house at the permitted hour, leaving bread from a ward's common bake on the sill, moving a small bundle from shed to threshold, or bringing lime to the latrine corner on the posted day. Names stand beside hours. The beadle marks a notch when the task is done. Persons under observation or caring for the unwell do not appear on the rotation. They remain receivers only until their health list shows no change for the stated span. Cordon Edge Assistance uses the barrier tables. Families inside place written lists of needed items on the table during the window. Neighbors outside purchase within their own market session and set the goods on the table with the inner address written large. The watch steps back and signals the inner side to collect. If coin is due, it travels in a small cloth bag sealed with a twist and a knot. The outside neighbor opens and counts later at home, not at the barrier, and writes a line in a small ledger for balance at week's end. The ward clerk settles any small differences on the afternoon stated for appeals, using the 2 ledgers and the table sheet. Tool sharing reduces contact by using fixed places and marks. A lane keeps a hook or shelf under an eave for a broom, a shovel, and a small handcart. Each tool bears a number. Each household has a matching token. When a tool is needed, the person hangs the token on the hook, lifts the tool, and returns it by the next bell. The beadle checks hooks on his round and writes a short note if a tool is missing past the bell. Tools are wiped with warm water where they hang. No wiping occurs hand to hand. Messages travel by slips with standard lines. A slip reads, from name or mark to house mark, at hour, task 1 word, note 1 line. Slips remain under the sill stone or at the barrier table. If the message concerns a pass or a change of hour, the slip is copied by the supervisor into the ward book. If the message concerns a private purchase or small exchange, no copy is made. Persons keep their slips tied on a cord for a day, then they are burned at the hearth when the fire is banked. Small loans and balances use tallies rather than long accounts. A split stick with notches records the value of bread, a measure of beans, or a bundle of wood. 1/2 stays with the giver, 1 with the receiver. On the stated afternoon each week, tallies are matched at the supervisor's door. Coin changes hands if needed, or a new notch is cut if the balance carries forward. The cutting board and knife remain at the supervisor's table. The process takes few words and ends within the hour. Care across doors follows a strict pattern. When a household with illness needs broth, hot water, or cloths, the neighbor leaves the item on the sill, taps, and steps back. The caregiver inside opens the door to the measured width, lifts the vessel or bundle, and closes the door. Vessels used for the sick room carry a mark. Those vessels never re-enter the common wash and are returned to the same neighbor only. If the neighbor cannot take them back, the supervisor assigns another house to boil the vessel and hold it for later return. Entries in the health list reflect these exchanges by hour and by item. Children do not act as couriers outside the doorway. Their tasks stay within the line of the threshold, lifting folded cloths from peg to basket, placing the sill stone, counting strokes on the wall tally during wiping, and calling the hour from the sand glass when boiling ends. Older persons coordinate lists and mark the wall strip. Where no able adult can leave the house, the rotation board assigns 2 adjacent households to alternate water and fuel for the week. The supervisor checks the board at dawn and after the second bell. Word of deaths and removals moves without display. When a removal team has passed on its fixed route, neighbors near the lane note the hour in their books and return indoors. There is no gathering, no speech. The quarter supervisor on his next round marks the door list accordingly and writes a small circle beside the hour in his margin to show that neighbors were informed by sight of the beer. Help to the household concerned takes the form of placing water, bread, or folded cloth on the sill at the next daylight hour. No other action occurs unless the ward board lists a need. Trade information is exchanged at distance and at fixed corners. Factors or porters call a single word, wood, grain, lime, fish, to notify availability within the hour window. They do not list prices or argue terms. Interested households raise a hand from their doorway. The factor moves along the right-hand side with his pass visible and leaves notes under stones when necessary. Payment occurs later by tally or at the threshold during the standard doorway sequence. The watch, hearing the one-word call, notes the time and continues the patrol. When weather interferes with assistance, the timing adjusts but not the steps. Heavy rain delays cordon table exchanges until the board shows moved under awning. Frost reduces distance speech. Neighbors write more slips and leave them under the sill stone. Wind from the exposed quarter moves the tool hook to the lee side by a fixed nail hole so tools do not fall. These changes appear as one-line notes on the ward board and require no extra talk. Households keep a small neighbor list on a strip pinned by the door. The strip names the 2 doors to the left and right and the house facing across the lane, with lines for water carried, fuel left, note delivered, and parcel returned. The strip resets each 7 days. The aim is not surveillance but to prevent duplication or neglect. If 2 neighbors deliver the same item on the same day, the supervisor writes a short instruction to alternate hours the next time. Officials maintain distance during all contact. The beadle signals from the lane and waits for a person to show at the window before speaking. The supervisor reads from his board, receives a yes or no with a nod, and writes the hour of the exchange. Clerks deliver papers on the sill and point to the line that requires a mark. The house places a sign on the strip and returns the paper to the sill. No one enters the room except by an order that names the house, the person, and the hour. Aid from civic stores is limited and regular. The hospital kitchen dispenses pottage at the second bell to persons with tokens. Neighbors carrying tokens for confined houses step to the end of the line, receive the measure, and return without stopping at other stalls. The token bears a day mark. Unused tokens return to the supervisor's box at curfew. The quarter board shows how many tokens were issued and used, and the town clerk totals them in the weekly return. Disputes about neighbor exchanges go to a fixed table after the second bell. The clerk hears one sentence from each side and looks at slips or tallies. If a parcel was misdelivered, he writes a short line for the barrier table if the houses lie under a cordon, or for the lane hook if not. The giver or receiver follows the line and corrects the error before curfew. Fines do not apply to these mistakes unless the watch recorded tampering with marks or ropes. In lanes with mixed crafts, schedule conflicts are prevented by a simple hour grid. Water carrying occurs at the first window, fuel at the next, then deliveries for weaving and tailoring, then returns from the shed, and finally cordon table exchanges. The grid hangs on the ward board and repeats each day. Households that miss a window wait for the next day rather than compress tasks into the same hour. The watch uses the grid to pace patrols, so checks do not overlap with the busiest movement. Silence is treated as a practical rule. Loud calls are discouraged so that instructions from the watch and the crier remain audible. The custom becomes familiar. 2 knocks for parcel, 3 knocks for message under stone, a tap and pause for water request acknowledged. At curfew, no sound comes from the lane except the bell and the patrol step. Neighbors keep to their rooms, doors barred, lamps low, and notes for the next day placed under the sill stone before sleep. By late afternoon, neighbor assistance shows as a set of small completions rather than large acts. Sill stones have moved and returned, hooks hold tools in order, the barrier table lists have fresh lines, and the rotation board shows new notches. House strips carry marks for carried water and left fuel. The quarter supervisor's margin holds short ticks for exchange messages and delivered parcels. Contact has been limited to fixed distances and short words. The day proceeds to the next hour blocks without delay or crowding. Household medicine relies on simple materials, fixed routines, and brief records. Actions are chosen from common practices of the time and are performed in the same order each day. The aim is to keep observation regular, handling separate and tasks short. The house keeps a small box for medical use only. The box holds a knife for cutting cloth, a mortar and pestle, a small balance with weights, 2 spoons, a cup marked for measures, pins, thread, strips of linen, and a wax tablet or scrap of paper for notes. None of these items leaves the house. Observation precedes action. The caregiver checks the sick person at set hours, after first light, near midday, in late afternoon, and before curfew. Each check records 5 things in the same order: heat of the body by touch, pace of breathing counted for a short interval, moisture of the mouth and lips, presence or change of swellings at the neck, armpit or groin, and ability to take water or broth. If sleep occurs, the check moves to the next hour. Notes use short words: hot, less hot, quick, slower, dry, moist, unchanged, larger, drank, refused. Dates and hours appear in the margin. The sick room is arranged with separation in mind. A bed or pallet stands away from the door. A small table holds the pitcher, cup, cloths, and notes. A bowl for hand washing stands near the door. It is used on entry and exit. A basket under the table holds used cloths. A window opens to the measured width during airing intervals. The door remains partly closed at other times. A cord with a small bell, if owned, signals the caregiver without raising the voice. Liquids are prepared in small amounts and given often. Water is boiled and cooled in a covered vessel. Barley water is made by boiling a handful of washed barley in water until the liquid turns cloudy. The grain is discarded and the liquid is kept covered. Thin broth is made from bones or a small piece of meat boiled long with a pinch of salt if available. Fat is skimmed. These liquids are offered by spoon or small cups, one measure at a time. If the person refuses, the refusal is noted. If vomiting occurs, the hour and amount are noted, and the next offer is delayed to the next fixed time. Aromatic waters and vinegar are used for wiping and for smell according to custom. A weak sour solution is prepared fresh each morning and used to wipe hands, lips, and the rim of the cup. Cloths lightly moistened with vinegar may be held near the nose for short periods. Aromatic herbs such as rosemary, sage, or rue, if available, are warmed near a brazier so that a mild scent rises. Smoke from juniper, bay, or similar woods is made in small amounts under a cover and allowed to pass. These actions follow the belief that strong scents and light smoke improve air. The steps remain steady whether effect is obvious or not. Poultices and plasters are simple. Warm cloths wrung from water or from a weak wine or vinegar mixture are laid over painful joints or along the ribs to ease movement. If swellings are present, many households leave them untouched. If a poultice is used, it is made of bread softened in warm liquid or a paste of ground herbs bound with linen, applied warm, and changed at set hours. Each change is recorded. No poultice moves from a swelling to another part of the body. If pain increases or the skin breaks, the poultice is removed and the area is kept clean and dry with cloths. Sweating is managed by small adjustments. Extra covers are added only if the person shivers and removed if the person overheats. The aim is steady warmth, not heat. Windows open for short, counted intervals to admit air. The fire remains small. The room is kept quiet. The caregiver avoids changing several things at once so that notes can show whether a single change preceded a small improvement or decline. Bloodletting and cupping are not household tasks unless a barber surgeon performs them by order. If a barber surgeon is called and permitted to enter, the visit appears on the priest-physician list or on a medical summons pass. The hour of entry and exit is recorded. If a letting or cupping is done, the surgeon leaves cloths and instructions for restraint, food, and rest. The household records the amount taken, the hour, and any faintness afterward. If no trained person is available, the house does not attempt these acts. Regimen of food follows plain rules. In the first days of heat and weakness, liquids predominate: water, barley water, and thin broth. If swallowing is possible, soft foods such as bread softened in broth or a thin porridge appear in small measures. Fresh fruit is often limited by custom. Dried fruit, if used, is soaked and given in small amounts. Meals occur at the same hours each day. If thirst is marked, offers of water continue between hours in small amounts. Refusals are not argued, the note suffices. If the person cannot take in liquids at 2 consecutive checks, the household sends a slip to the ward supervisor to request a watcher or a physician. Pain relief uses modest means. Warm cloths are applied to the lower legs and arms. A light rubbing with oil, if owned, may be done along the back using straight strokes. Quiet is maintained. A cushion supports the head. The bed is kept low. Strong wines or cordials are uncommon in many houses. If given, they are mixed with water and recorded as wine and water 1 spoon. If sleep comes, the room is not disturbed for cleaning. That task waits for the next airing interval. Cleanliness of the body is maintained without full bathing. The face, neck, hands and underarms are wiped with warm water and a separate cloth once or twice per day. The mouth is rinsed with warm water and lips are wiped with the weak, sour solution. Bed linen is changed as needed. If pieces are few, a folded cloth lies over the soiled part until the next boiling hour. Waste is collected in a covered vessel and emptied apart from the household's common bucket on the permitted hour. Spills are covered with ash or sand and lifted at once. The mat near the bed is wiped after each such action. Handling of swellings is cautious. The household notes location and size by touch relative to a finger width. The note reads, for example, groin 2 finger widths, hot, or neck 1 finger width, less hot. If the skin breaks on its own, the area is gently covered with clean, dry cloth changed at each check. Moist poultices are not placed over broken skin. If odor appears, the hour is recorded and a slip is sent for a surgeon or watcher. The house does not lance swellings on its own. Apothecary goods, if owned, are used according to simple lines written on their paper or jar. Common items include theriac, rosewater, electuary of simple spices, and syrups labeled for cough or weakness. Measures are small and entries are made by hour and spoon. If 2 items are given in the same part of the day, the order is written. If a new item is added, the house waits a full check before adding another. When a jar empties, the paper or label is kept and pinned to the note so that the same item is not counted twice by mistake. Caregiver routine protects the rest of the house. The caregiver uses the sick room bowl for washing on entry and exit, changes the overcloth once daily, and keeps a simple head covering. The caregiver does not carry food from the kitchen to the sick room and back. A second person moves the tray to the sill, then steps away while the caregiver lifts it. When the caregiver is tired, a watcher or neighbor stands the next hour by prearrangement. The change is written on the notes with both names and the hour. Household limits are recognized. If breathing becomes fast and shallow for more than a short count and remains so at the next check, a slip goes to the ward table to request a physician. If the person cannot drink for a full round of checks, a slip goes for a watcher. If confusion deepens and the person fails to answer or rises without aim, the door is kept barred and a slip goes for assistance. These slips carry the words watcher or physician, the address and the hour. The beadle returns a line stating when a person can arrive. Records help decisions. The household keeps the wax tablet or paper strip with dates and hours. A short line at the end of each day summarizes, took liquids 3 times, swellings unchanged, heat less, sleep 2 periods, or similar. The quarter supervisor reads only the summary when compiling counts. Detailed lines remain with the house unless a physician asks to see them. If the person improves, the notes continue until 3 days pass without new signs. If the person declines, the last lines guide the removal team as to hour and handling. Handling of medicines across doors uses the sill method. An apothecary or neighbor leaves a wrapped packet or a jar on the sill, steps back, and waits. the caregiver lifts the item, sets it on the mat, reads the label, and enters the hour in the notes. If coin is due, it returns on the same cloth strip or by tally at week's end. Empty jars return on the next daylight hour. No vessel from the sick room returns to common wash. It moves only to the original giver or to a boiling assigned house. Rest and quiet are treated as actions, not as absence. The lane remains silent. The room holds only the sounds of breathing and small movements. The hourglass or sand glass marks the checks. The caregiver sits at the same place by the small table. The routine repeats at each bell. Other household tasks continue in the outer room on schedule so that water, fuel, and food do not fail. If death occurs, the sequence follows the ward rule. The caregiver covers the face, closes the door, and sends a slip to the supervisor or to the watch post with the hour. The removal team arrives on its fixed route. The bier is covered. The team notes the hour of collection at the door and the hour of arrival at the burial ground. House notes close with the last line, "Removed at hour." Cloths, bedding, and vessels used in the sick room remain set apart for treatment as the ward instructs. The rotation board assigns neighbors to leave water and bread at the next daylight hour. No further action occurs in the lane. If recovery starts, steps reduce slowly. Liquids continue on the same hours for a day, then soft food appears in small amounts. Airing intervals lengthen. The bed linen changes to ordinary schedule. The notes shift from 4 checks to 3 per day, then to 2. After a full 7 days without new signs, the house resumes ordinary routines, and the sickroom equipment returns to the box clean and counted. The final note reads, "No change for 7 days." The supervisor marks the door list for removal at the next round. This set of practices remains the same regardless of weather or rumor. Materials are common, movements are short, and words are few. The steps do not assume quick effect. They keep the room, the record, and the house in order while outside rules govern cordons, passes, and hours. The next part continues with signs and home observation in detail, which proceed by the same measured checks and brief lines. Quarantine rules separate persons, houses, and goods by fixed terms and visible marks. The term most used for persons and houses is 40 days. Shorter terms apply to goods according to distance traveled and type. All terms begin and end by written hour. The ward supervisor keeps a list with 4 columns: address or bundle mark, cause, start hour, release hour. The same list appears at the barrier table if a cordon encloses several houses. Arrival from outside the walls follows a simple path. The gate watch reads the paper, writes the hour, and directs the person either to a perimeter shed or to a holding house according to the notice of the day. If the traveler comes from a place with posted marks or from a ship or barge that declared illness at its last landing, the person moves to a holding house. If the traveler bears a clean paper and comes from a place with no posted marks, the person waits a shorter term in a lodging under observation and uses only transit lanes at named hours. The watch enters the route and hours on the pass. Holding houses stand near the wall with separate doors that open to the lane and to a small yard. Rooms are plain. A list hangs inside each door: airing hours, water hours, waste removal hours, and the rule for visitors, no entry, sill only. Food comes by tokens at the second bell. Water is carried at set times. Waste leaves through a back gate at the posted hour. The beadle visits twice each day, writes the hour and marks any breach. At the end of term, the supervisor brings the release slip, initials the list, and takes the house off the board. House quarantine follows when a person shows signs or when a member of the household had close contact with a known case. The door receives a mark in paint and a paper with the start hour. The paper states door closed by term, the number of days, and the clerk's mark. A short cord runs across the steps if the threshold opens directly to the lane. The sill method handles all exchanges. The rotation board assigns neighbors for water and fuel. The household follows the same interior schedule as before, only exits change. Cordon quarantine applies to a group of houses with several marks. Barrels, stakes, and rope form a barrier line. 2 controlled gaps hold tables for lists and parcels. The watch keeps the tables and signs each parcel in and out. Persons inside do not pass the rope. Persons outside do not hand across. They leave items on the table. A board beside the gap list addresses inside, with a second column for tokens given, a third for deliveries left, and a fourth for notes. When a house inside clears by the rule, the address receives a diagonal line, and the mark on the door is repainted in black with the word lift and a date. Goods rest by distance and type. Bales from far towns rest longest, bundles from nearby places rest shorter. Cloth, hides, hair goods, and felt receive the longest rest. Grain and flour rest fewer days. Oil and vinegar jars rest by day count only if stoppers are changed at the shed. Otherwise they pass with a wipe and a note. Fish in barrels pass if the inspector's check is plain. Fresh fish rest only if the board says so due to news from upriver. Each bundle or jar carries a wrapper with the day and hour of last handling and the end hour of rest. No bundle moves inward before the end hour except by written order. Fumigation is used on certain goods after rest or in place of a longer rest if supplies run short. The shed has a frame, a brazier, and covers. A measured fuel charge burns for the set time. The beadle writes the start and end hours on a slip and ties it to the bundle. If fumigation replaces days of rest, the wrapper shows fumigated at hour, and the board shows days reduced by number. No fumigation is used on powder goods that would spoil from smoke. Those keep the full rest. Ship and river quarantine uses landing sheds and a marked key strip. Boats tie at the outer bollard. Crew remain aboard unless a pass allows landing to carry papers to the table. Bales remain on deck or under a cover until the inspector reads the papers from the last port. If illness was declared upriver, the cargo rests the longer term. The boat receives a chalk mark on the bow to show its status. When rest ends, the watch wipes the mark and writes the release hour in the key book. Passes during quarantine are limited and carry stricter hours. A watcher's pass allows entry to a holding house at named hours only. A priest's list includes addresses inside the cordon and the word threshold. A medical summons may allow entry to one room by order. The order names the house, the room, and the hour. A porter's pass covers only the route from the shed to a barrier table and back. Any pass with a breach mark returns to the clerk. No new pass issues until the clerk writes a correction or the term ends. Release relies on time and on the absence of new signs. For houses, the supervisor reads the household strip. No new signs for the last 7 days, and water and waste recorded at set hours. If the list agrees, he writes the release slip with date and hour and removes the mark. For persons in holding houses, the beadle checks the beadle's own list. Daily visits recorded, no breaches, no slip for watcher or physician. He writes the release hour in the room list and at the ward board. For goods, the end hour on the wrapper controls. The beadle removes the wrapper and signs the shed book. Breach procedures are uniform. If a person crosses the rope or opens a door marked by term and steps out, the watch writes the hour and the address. The person returns inside at once. The beadle pins a breach slip to the ward board. First breach draws a warning. Second breach draws a fine at the lower rate. Third breach extends the term by a posted number of days. If a bundle leaves the shed before its end hour, it returns and restarts its count. If a pass holder enters a room not named on the pass is taken at once and the clerk hears the matter the next afternoon. Records keep quarantine regular. The ward book has a quarantine table, address or bundle mark, cause, start, release, breaches, fines, initials. The cordon table shows addresses inside, water and fuel rotations, tokens issued, and notes. The shed book lists bundle marks, types, start and end hours, fumigations, and releases. The key book lists boat names, last port, cargo types, mark applied, and release hour. At week's end, the town clerk totals starts, releases, breaches, and fines, reads the totals, and files the sheets by day. Provisions to quarantined houses follow a simple scale. Each day, a household under term may buy bread in the same amounts as posted for others, collected by neighbor or porter. Grain and beans follow the same limits. Oil and vinegar sit at the lower end of ordinary limits. Meat comes only on permitted days and only in early hours. Fish follows the fish window. Tokens for hospital pottage count against the daily line. The barrier table list prevents duplication. Prices remain the same as at market. No surcharges allowed. Visitors do not enter. Doorway practice handles all cases. If a priest visits, the list shows the address and the hour. The door opens a hand's width. Words are spoken briefly. If a physician enters a room by summons, the pass shows it. The watch writes the time of entry and exit on the list at the barrier table if a cordon stands, or in the ward book if the house stands alone. The physician's instructions remain in the sick room. The supervisor notes only that a visit occurred. Work inside quarantined houses is limited to domestic tasks. Repairs occur at the threshold. Deliveries come to the sill. Piecework may continue if it requires no entry or exchange of common tools. Finished pieces leave by the barrier table in a covered bundle after a rest by day count. Wages return by tally or at the sill at the next daylight hour. If a craft requires heat or fumes, the supervisor may deny it for the term to avoid smoke in a closed lane. He writes the word deny with a date and hour on the ward board. Appeals for reduction of term follow a form. The house writes address, cause, start hour, days served, and reason for request in one line. Reasons allowed are limited. Wrong start hour, miscopied end hour, goods classed wrong by type, or duplicate entry on the list. The clerk looks at the ward book, shed book, or key book and corrects only if the record supports it. Hardship does not shorten term. It may bring extra tokens from the ward box, noted by number, not by words. Cleaning after release follows a set order. For houses, the supervisor writes a slip with open and the hour. The household airs rooms by the longest interval that day. Cloths used during the term boil in 2 batches, house and sick room. Surfaces wipe with warm water, then with the sour mixture. The sill mat is replaced. Ash from small fumigations, if any, is cooled and removed to a marked bin. The door mark is washed and the paper is removed. For holding houses, the ward team scrubs floors, wipes doors and latches, boils cloths, and leaves windows open by measure. The beadle signs the room sheet with cleaned and the hour. Neighbor contact resumes in steps. The rotation board drops the address from receivers only to ordinary, but the house remains off the water and fuel rota for 7 days more. The neighbor list resets. The sill method stays in use for a week as a habit. The supervisor checks the door list once more at 7 days after release. If no new sign appears, he writes closed on the quarantine line in his book. Quarantine for apprentices and servants follows the same lines as for households. If an apprentice lives in the master's house, the door mark controls all. If the apprentice lives apart, the apprentice stays within that door and does not work or carry between houses. Tallies for wages pause and resume on release. The ledger carries a single line term served. If a servant falls ill at a client house, the client house follows the term. The servant's home address is marked by contact and follows a shorter term if the board so states. Church and hall adapt their practice. No common processions occur. Names for prayers travel by slip under the sill stone at the porch or by the ward board at hours posted. The priest's list carries the address and hour lines. The church board shows only hours and closed or open for private prayer. The hall's small table hears only pass appeals and notice corrections. Larger sittings pause or move to short forms with windows open and marks on the floor. Weather does not change terms. Rain moves barrier tables under awnings and shifts rope lines to keep the ground firm. Frost brings sand to the gap and shortens the outer weight. Heat adds a second airing hour at holding houses. Wind moves the cordon gap to the lee side to hold the lists in place. Boards show these shifts in one line. Hours and days remain as written. Supply to the cordon uses 2 paths to avoid crossing. From sheds to barrier tables moves by a lane posted porters only this hour. From tables to doors moves by the inner lane in the opposite direction. The watch times both paths and writes clear or delayed if carts or callers slow the route. If delay repeats, the council adds a second table or cuts session length to spread loads. Enforcement uses visible limited acts. A breach brings a mark in the ledger and a word on the ward board. A fine uses the same rate as other posted fines. Confinement at home for a day follows only if the same person repeats breaches. No heavier act appears on the board. The watch avoids argument, writes the line, and moves on. The ledger and the totals carry the effect. By keeping terms, marks, wrappers, passes, and tables uniform, quarantine and isolation proceed without guesswork. Persons, houses, and goods follow their lines. Lists carry hours. Boards state rules in short words. Where terms end, the mark lifts and the door returns to ordinary practice. The next part turns to movement and transport in detail, how carts, letters, and persons pass under reduced openings so that interior rules match the paths outside the doors. Movement outside doors follows posted hours and fixed paths. The day divides into windows for water, bread, fuel, workshop deliveries, shed collections, and letter carriage. Each window uses the same lanes in the same order to reduce crossing. Persons keep to the right-hand side. Transit-only lanes run one way and are marked at corners with an arrow board and the date. Closed lanes hold a rope and a notice. Restricted lanes open only to residents with addresses inside during the written hour. The watch times the first and last person of each window and enters both hours in the patrol book. Gate management uses a simple sequence. At first light, the outer wicket opens for foot traffic with passes. The main leaves open later for carts at the posted hour. A chalk line marks the show point. The watch reads passes, notes origin and destination, and points to the permitted lane. Carriers without loads pass before carts. Carts pass in single file with a fixed spacing measured by paces. Loads are described on a slip tied to the foreboard. Kind, count, and weight by town measure when known. Wheels are checked for soundness. A spare pin and a rope are visible on each cart. If a pin is missing or a tire is loose, the cart waits at the side post until repaired. Within wards, hour blocks prevent crowding. Water carrying uses the first window. Porters with yokes move toward wells and back by the same lane. Bread collection uses the second window. Persons with household passes go to the market and return directly. Fuel collection uses the next window. Wood and charcoal move on handcarts, not on shoulders, to keep hands free for turns. Workshop deliveries use the following window. Factors and apprentices carry small bundles to thresholds. Shed collections use the mid-afternoon window. Bales released from rest move inward to shops. Letters and small parcels use the last daylight window, so the guard may enter outcomes in the gate book before curfew. Bridges and narrow ways use alternating direction. Boards at each end show in or out with the hour band. The watch flips the board at the bell. Persons wait in single file on the right until the hour changes. Carts cross only on the cart hour and only one at a time. If a cart stops, the driver sets a wheel wedge, shortens the trace, and clears the way by hand. The wedge and a hook hang from the foreboard for this purpose. The beadle notes any stop longer than a minute and writes the cause and the cart mark. River movement follows quay rules. Boats moor at outer bollards first, inner bollards fill after the inspector's signal. Crew remain aboard unless a pass allows landing for papers. Sample sacks are lifted to the quay table. Bales remain covered until rest or fumigation ends. A chalk mark on the bow shows status. A plain stroke for rest, a circle for cleared. A key book lists boat name, last port, cargo kind, mark applied, and hour of release. If wind rises, small boats tie under the lee of the bridge on the posted rings. The board shows rings full when the lower line holds all places. Animal movement is limited and recorded. Pigs and poultry remain within yards except on slaughter days at early hour. Pack animals pass only on the fuel and shed windows and carry a tag naming load and route. Hooves are checked at the post to prevent slipping on stone. Sand is thrown on steep entries in frost. Droppings are lifted by the owner at once. A scoop and bucket ride on the cart or hang on the pack frame. Failure to lift draws a beadle's mark and a small fine at the hole. Cartloads follow weight and tie rules. A load sits within the height of the sideboard. Ropes cross front to back and side to side and not over a pegged cleat. A tally strip under the cord shows count and destination. Drivers keep the right-hand side and stop short of door sills. If a lane is transit only, carts do not turn. They circle by the outer ring to return. Wheel noise is reduced by leather washers when owned. The rule does not require them. Axles receive grease at the shed before entry. A small pot with a lid travels on the foreboard. Fires for heating grease are not lit within lanes. Letters and small parcels travel by a fixed chain. The sender writes a short slip, name or mark, address, hour, and one line. The slip and item go in a cloth pouch. Pouches wait at the ward board until the letter window. The runner carries a rod with hooks. Each hook holds a pouch by ward. At each corner listed on the rod, the runner leaves the pouch on the sill, taps, and steps back. The receiver lifts the pouch and places a return strip on the sill with a mark and the hour. The runner hooks the return and moves on. At the end of the round, the runner hands returns to the ward clerk, who enters counts on a small table. Sent, delivered, no answer. Cordon edges use barrier tables for transport. Inside, addresses post lists. Outside, neighbors place purchases and parcels on the table during the cordon window. The watch steps back and signals the inner side. Coin moves in sealed cloths. Balances use tallies matched at week's end at the supervisor's door. No hand passes over the rope. If rain falls, the table moves under an awning. The watch records the move with hour and reason. Medical and emergency movement uses special passes. A physician's summons names an address and a room and allows passage in any lane during the written hour. A watcher's pass allows entry to holding houses and to cordoned lanes at the table only. Removal orders state the shortest path to the burial ground. The team keeps that path at all hours and avoids market fronts. Fire lines override cordons on the shortest path for buckets. The beadle opens the rope, records start and end minutes, and restores the line. Work movement crosses wards by trade permit. The permit shows origin, destination, route, and hour band. Sweeps, masons, smiths on repair, and carpenters with shutters carry these permits. The watch reads the hour and points to the lane. If a worker misses the band, the worker returns to origin by the shortest path. The beadle notes the late return. Repeated late returns shorten future bands for that address. Goods associated with such permits wait at sheds. Only samples move with the person. Shed practice standardizes inward flow. Bales released from rest line up under letter marks. Each bale has a wrapper with last handled hour and end of rest hour. The beadle cuts the wrapper at the beadle's table, ties a release slip, and points to the inward lane for that hour. Factors weigh and cut at the shed board, not at shop doors. Carts leave by the posted cart window and run the outer ring to avoid mixing with foot traffic. If a bale lacks a wrapper or slip, it remains until the clerk writes a correction. Weather adjusts timing and footing. Heavy rain moves fish hand carts under bridge roofs and delays cart windows on steep lanes. Frost adds a sand spreading round before first bell. Cart movement begins after sand. Heat shifts load-bearing tasks earlier, shortens meat carriage hours, and adds a water pause for porters. Wind from the exposed quarter closes a river landing and opens the lee landing. The board at the quay shows the change with hour. These adjustments use one-line notices and do not alter pass types. Curfew defines night movement. At the first bell, fires are banked and shop shutters narrow. At the second bell, lane movement ends except for the watch, physicians on summons, removal teams, and priests on call. Lamps are covered so that light does not show through shutters. Watch patrols pass each lane once per bell and note any open shutter or strong glow. A request for correction is made at once. A line goes in the patrol book with hour and house mark. Road surfaces and gutters are kept passable by rotation. Sweepers push sand from piles to wet patches and steep corners. Gutter clearers begin at the upper end, lift silt with hooks and move down so water runs. Waste carts collect from marked heaps on alternate days. The beadle times how long a heap stands. If delay extends beyond the posted count, the council moves one hand from a less urgent duty. Broken paving stones receive a peg flag. Masons replace the stones on the next dry morning. Doorway practice controls delivery at thresholds. Carriers set goods on the sill, step back and wait. The house lifts, signs a strip if required, and closes the door. Tools and coin remain on cloth to avoid hand-to-hand. If a cart delivers several parcels in one lane, the driver sets each on each sill in order and collects strips on the return pass. If a parcel is misdelivered, the receiver moves it to the lane hook. The driver retrieves it on the next pass. The ward clerk hears errors after the second bell and writes a one-line correction to the hook list. Ferries and fords outside the walls keep reduced schedules. A board at the gate lists ferry hours, boat capacity by count, and wind limits. Passengers with passes board first, goods follow. No ferry takes carts when wind is strong. Fords close at rain hour and reopen when the watch writes water down on the gate board. Messengers leave copies of town notices at ferry houses for hamlets across the river and write left at ferry in the outbook. Timekeeping keeps flow steady. Bells mark window starts and stops. The watch at each post writes the bell count and the number of persons or carts that passed. When a window closes, a short gap holds before the next window opens to clear lanes. If a line remains at the bell, the steward counts those within the rope and closes behind them. Persons who miss a window wait for the next day. No exceptions are read at the post. Records align across books. The gate book shows passes used, cart counts, and boat marks. The ward book shows window counts, refusals, and late returns. The shed book shows bales released and carts dispatched. The key book shows moorings and releases. Weekly totals move to the town clerk's table. and differences trigger small changes. One more porter hour if fuel lags, one shorter cart window if foot lanes slow, one added sand run in frost if slips rise. By late afternoon, movement shows as even runs rather than crowds. Water has returned, bread and fuel are indoors, workshop bundles have moved, released bales have reached shops, and letters have passed to doors. Carts circle the outer ring, transit lanes remain clear, and posts record hours without long lines. With transport complete for the day and curfew ahead, the city returns to household tasks and the evening restrictions set on the boards. Parish life proceeds within posted limits. Parish boundaries follow older lines. Ward boundaries overlay them for movement and hours. A small board at the church porch lists opening hours for private prayer, short public offices, confession at the porch, and the priest's door rounds. The same hours appear on the town board under the heading church. Bells mark starts and ends. Times remain whole hours. No processions occur. No assemblies beyond the posted count occur. Access to the building uses the same rope and gap pattern as the market. One rope marks the entrance, one marks the exit. Pegs in the floor or chalk marks on stone show where to stand. Windows and doors remain open by a measured span during offices. The verger counts persons at entry and writes the hour. The office is short, an opening, a reading, a short prayer, and dismissal. No sermon is given. Singing is reduced to a single psalm or omitted. A reader speaks instead. People leave by the exit rope in order. The verger wipes door latches and bench fronts with warm water after each office. Private prayer uses steady rules. The porch stays open for 2 short periods in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. Persons enter one by one, keep to marked places, and depart at the bell. Candles are set at a side table. The almoner trims wicks and removes stubs. The font remains covered. Water is changed only by a clerk at the posted hour and is not offered for common use. Holy oil and vessels stay in the sacristy and leave only on a priest's list for a named house. Cloths used in the church boil at day's end in the sacristy pot. Names for prayer travel by slip. A small board at the porch holds a box with a slit. Slips read name, address, and health, thanks, or death in one word. The deacon reads slips at the short noon office without additions. No lists are read aloud at other hours. The box is emptied after curfew. Slips from that day go to a bundle with the date. The almoner notes how many slips asked for hospital tokens and passes the count to the ward. Sacraments follow the threshold rule unless a written summons names a room. Confession occurs at the porch or at the sill. The penitent stands at the mark. The priest stands 2 paces away and speaks short forms. Communion to the sick uses a pyx with a cloth. The pyx is carried on the priest's list with address and hour. Wine and water remain in small vessels for the priest's use only. Cloths return to the sacristy and boil in the church pot. The priest writes the address, hour, and communion given on the list. The watch marks the hour at the lane post if accordance stands. Baptisms and marriages follow reduced forms. Baptism occurs at the porch or at home by permission. The notice reads name, address, and hour. The font cover lifts only for the service and is replaced at once. Marriages pause except by necessity recorded by the clerk. If performed, they occur at the porch with 2 witnesses, short vows, and a posted hour. Bans and notices are pinned to the porch board for 3 market days. The clerk writes entries in the register with date, names, and witnesses. No feast or gatherings follow. Burial coordination is administrative here. Rites remain brief. The burial groundkeeper posts hours for entry and path for the bier. The priest meets the removal team at the gate or at the trench edge according to hour. Short prayer is said. The keeper writes time and trench. Names, if known, move to the church register. Other details remain in the ward ledger. The church does not hold night watches or wakes. The porch remains closed after curfew. Charity uses tokens and tables rather than gatherings. The almoner receives grain, bread, and small coin at a fixed hour at the south door. Gifts are weighed or counted and entered by donor mark. Tokens are cut for the poor by ward lists and exchanged for pottage at the hospital kitchen. The almoner tallies tokens given and returns unused pieces to the box at curfew. Guilds that maintained lamps or altars convert oil and wax gifts to lamp oil for homes and to vinegar and soap scraps for cleaning. Entries show conversion and issue by weight. The hospital posts its own hours and returns totals to the town clerk. Fraternities and guild confraternities suspend common meetings. Custodians keep lamps trimmed and cloths washed on schedule. The sacristan checks roofs, gutters, and door bars, notes small repairs, and calls a mason or carpenter with a trade permit when needed. Bench spacing remains, no temporary seating is added. The reader's desk carries a short set of lessons on fixed rotation, so a change of reader does not alter length. The priest's day follows a list. Morning office in church at the posted hour. Porch confessions at the next hour. House rounds by the priest's list in late morning. Addresses, hours, and marks for prayer, communion, or sick call. The list travels with the pass. The watch signs at the barrier table if accordance stands. Midday meal. Short noon office with slips. Afternoon, second house round or porch office if notice is changed. Before curfew, sacristy cleaning and registers. The list closes with totals and returns to the clerk. Registers remain simple and current. 3 lines are kept: baptisms, marriages, and burials. Each holds date, names when known, address or ward, and officiant's mark. A 4th line holds prayers at home, with addresses and hours to show movement under passes. Copies go weekly to the town clerk. Discrepancies between ward and church counts are noted and corrected by short slips. Errors concern hour or name marks only. No sermons, causes, or judgments enter the books. Cleaning follows measured steps. Doors, latches, stall fronts, and the reader's desk are wiped with warm water after each office. Floors are swept toward the door and sanded where needed. The font cover stays on except at baptism. The rim is wiped and dried at once. Cloths from the altar and the porch table boil in the sacristy pot, dry on lines, and are folded with a mark to show a full day has passed since boiling. The broom, bucket, and cloths bear church marks and do not leave the building. Interaction with civic watch is brief. The watch points to boards and checks passes. The priest shows the list, the address, and the hour. If a lane is closed, the priest waits for the window or walks the posted detour. If a cordon stands, the threshold rule applies. The watch steps back. The priest speaks at the sill and writes prayer at sill in the margin. The beadle notes the time on the cordon table. No other exchange occurs. Schools and catechism change form. Reading and memorization move to homes. The priest or reader leaves short leaves at thresholds with a verse and a line of instruction on market days. Children repeat lines at windows at an appointed hour. The reader listens from the lane and writes heard on a slip. Larger groups do not gather. The leaves return to the church for reuse or burning depending on where. The aim is steady practice, not speed. Other congregations, where present, post and follow the same types of boards: hours for prayer, threshold rules, and lists for house visits. Their clerks exchange tables with the town clerk on fixed days, counts of visits, burials sent to the ground, and requests for tokens. Differences in wording do not change hours or rope practice. Records stay in the same column so totals align. Sound signals remain standardized. One bell before offices. A short stroke at the start and end of market hours. 2 strokes for cordon changes posted by the council. Curfew in 2 rounds. No tolling to assemble crowds. If a removal passes, no bell sounds from the church. The keeper's board controls the ground. The bell rope is checked each morning and night. Frayed lines are replaced before they fail. Weather shifts spaces but not order. Rain moves the office to the nave. The porch remains for entries. Heat shortens offices by a posted measure and increases intervals of open windows. Frost moved the line for private prayer into the south aisle with sand on the floor. Wind closes the north door and opens the south. The board shows the change. These notes stay 1 line long and use the same words as town boards. Money handling stays on cloths and tallies. Alms boxes open at posted hours only. The almoner and verger both mark the count. Coin is wrapped in strips by fixed sums and entered. Tallies are cut for larger gifts and matched at week's end. No gatherings for distribution occur. Tokens carry the day mark. Used tokens return to a basket for recount and burning. Clergy rotation prevents gaps. If a priest falls ill, the deacon or a neighboring priest takes the list and marks substitute beside his name. The ward notes the change on its board. Visits continue at the same hours. If both priest and deacon are ill, the council requests a substitute from a near parish through the notice exchange. The gate clerk writes the hour of entry on the pass. Registers carry the substitute's mark until the priest returns. Evening closure is exact. The last office ends before the first curfew bell. Doors meet and bar. Lamps are cleared and covered. Cloths hang. The sacristy chest locks. The key returns to its hook. The clerk closes the day book with lines for offices held, visits made, cloths boiled, and alms received. The bell rope is coiled. The porch board receives the next day's hours if the council has ordered a change. Otherwise, the lines remain. This pattern holds the religious and community functions to short, predictable parts: entry and exit ropes, fixed hours, threshold sacraments, slips for names and prayers, tokens for charity, and clean registers. It aligns with ward rules, market windows, and cordons so movement does not cross. The next part turns to burial and accounting in detail, teams, routes, records, and ground use, which proceed by the same measured steps. Removal proceeds by fixed team, route, and hour. The ward keeps a list of addresses for the day. The beadle writes the order in which doors will be called. The team consists of 2 or 4 carriers, a driver if a cart is used, and a clerk with a small book. The team wears shoulder signs and carries its pass. The bier or covered cart stands at the ward post until the first bell of the window. The cloth over the bier is plain and tied at the corners. At the door, the clerk reads the address and writes the hour. The caregiver opens the door to a measured width. The body lies wrapped in a sheet or in a simple shroud tied at head and feet. No washing takes place. If a board is needed to lift, the team slides it under and lifts in one motion. If space is narrow, a rope sling is used. No words beyond name, if known, and hour are exchanged. The door closes. The clerk writes "taken" and the route resumes. Property handling follows a short rule. Items on the body remain with the body. A separate small bundle held at the sill may contain a token, a written line, or a garment for burial. The clerk notes "bundle with body." Goods not at the sill stay in the house. If the ward has posted a rule for simple effects, the caregiver ties a cloth with a list and hands it at the sill for fumigation or burning. The clerk writes "effects received" with a count. The team does not search. The route to the burial ground is fixed and avoids market fronts. Corners are taken wide to keep the cart steady. The watch at each lane post writes the passing hour on the patrol sheet. If a cordon stands, the rope opens for the team only. The beadle records opened and closed with minutes. No one follows the team. The street remains clear. If the ground lies outside the gate book receives the hour of exit and return. The burial ground keeper controls entry. A board at the gate shows opening and closing hours and the path to the active trench. If 2 grounds exist, parish ground and common ground, the board lists which ground is open that day. A short line marks when consecrated rites are said at the trench edge. The keeper keeps a trench plan, rows marked A, B, C by peg, and positions numbered by stake. Lime stands in covered tubs by the trench. Shovels, mattocks, and boards lie in order. Receiving at the gate uses a small ledger. The clerk states ward, address, and name if known. The keeper writes time and assigns trench row and number. The team moves to the marked trench. If the ground is soft, boards bridge the edge. The body is lowered by the team with a rope loop or by hand. If a shroud is used, it remains tied. If a simple coffin is used, it is not opened. The keeper sprinkles lime by scoop according to rule. The trench is closed to the required depth when the day's line is complete. Rites are brief and occur at posted hours. A priest meets the team at the gate or at the trench edge according to time. A short prayer is spoken. No crowd forms. Names are not read aloud. If the priest is not present at that hour, the team proceeds. The register later notes prayer at gate or prayer at trench as applies. Night burials do not occur. If removal late in the day would pass curfew, the body rests at the ward post under cover with a beadle's mark and goes at first light. Registers remain simple. The ward death list holds date, address, hour found, hour removed, name if known, sex if known, age if known, signs noted, and remarks: bundle, priest, cordon. The keeper's ground book holds date, ward, address, name or unknown, trench row, position, and time. The church book holds date, name if known, address or ward, and officiant's mark. Totals move weekly to the town clerk's table. Differences are corrected by line and initial. Unknown persons receive sequential numbers. The ward writes unknown number on the line, describes clothing in one word, and enters hour. The keeper repeats the number in the ground book. If identity is later learned, the ward writes a correction slip with the number and new name. The keeper adds the name in the margin. No disinterment occurs. The number remains in the church book with the new name beside it. Multiple removals from one house use one line per person. The clerk writes entries separately with their hours. If the house is under term, the door mark remains until the supervisor lifts it according to the quarantine rule. Neighbors leave water and bread at the next daylight hour on the sill and mark their strips. No gathering occurs. The rotation board assigns 2 houses for the following day to carry water and fuel at the permitted windows. Tools and materials follow control to prevent shortage. Shovels and mattocks bear numbers. Lime counts by tub. Boards and ropes are checked at day's start and end. The keeper writes losses, if any, and the beadle reports to the council. Ash and waste from the ground do not enter lanes. Carts take them to the marked pit on alternate days. If rain fills a trench, the keeper posts delay, water, and moves to the next row after sand is thrown. Fees are reduced or suspended by notice during the term of restrictions. If a fee exists, it is noted in the ward book and paid at the town hall at the posted hour. The poor pay by token. No payment is requested at a door or at the trench. Donations go to the church or to the hospital at their tables and appear as tallies in their books, not in ward or ground books. The clerk's and keeper's wages come from the council fund and are entered as fixed amounts. Handling of infants and stillborn follows a short form. The ward writes infant or stillborn, address, and hour. The team carries as above. The keeper assigns position and writes the word in the book. The priest says the same short prayer at the posted hour. No separate ground is opened. The record aligns with the church register, which carries the same words and hours. Overflow procedures keep order. When a trench row fills, the keeper places a peg at the end and writes row closed, hour. The plan advances to the next row. When a ground nears capacity, the council opens the second ground and posts the new board line. If both grounds near capacity, the council orders longer trenches and a second team by notice. Teams do not work after curfew. Work resumes at first light. Safety steps for carriers remain fixed. Hands and faces are washed at the ward post before departure and after return. Overcloths are changed daily. Ropes and boards are wiped with warm water and left to dry. The cart is brushed, and the cloth cover is aired and folded. The beadle signs the postbook. Team out, hour, team in, hour, Tools, count, lime tubs used. Missing counts draw a warning. Repeated loss draws a fine. Reports align across offices. Each evening, the ward sends a short return. Removals counted, addresses, hours, and unknowns. The keeper sends trench positions used and tools counted. The church sends burials read into the register. The town clerk totals entries and posts 3 lines on the internal sheet. Removals today, burials today, and week to date. Public boards do not show names or numbers beyond earlier illness tallies. Weather changes timing but not structure. Heavy rain delays digging. The keeper writes the delay on the gate board and extends hours in the morning by the same amount. Frost adds sand to paths and slows lowering. Heat increases lime scoops by a fixed small amount. Wind moves the prayer point to the lee side of a wall. These changes appear in one line at the gate and in a note in the ground book. House cleaning after removal follows the ward line. The supervisor gives a slip with air, longest interval, boil cloths 2 batches, wipe, water then sour, and mat, replace. Neighbors place water and bread on the sill next day at daylight hour. The door mark remains until the quarantine rule ends. The house records removed hour as the last line for that person on the sick room strip. The strip stays in the house unless a physician requests to copy it. Disputes are handled at fixed tables. If an address claims wrong hour or missed removal, the clerk shows the ward line, the keeper shows the gate book. If a name is misspelled in the church book, the clerk writes a correction slip and the church adds a marginal note. If 2 wards list the same person, the town clerk strikes 1 line and initials the correction. No long hearing occurs. Lighting and night limits are observed. No burials after curfew. Lamps at the gate and along the path are used only to close the book and bar the door. The keeper checks the bar and writes the hour. The team does not move by night. If a death occurs after the 2nd bell, the house writes a slip and sets it under the sill stone. The removal line in the ward book marks at first light. By late afternoon, removals for the day end. The ward list shows taken beside each address. The gate book shows entries and returns. The ground plan shows filled positions. Lime tubs stand with lids. Tools are counted and stacked. The priest's list marks hours met. Registers carry the day's lines in order. Lanes remain clear. The city moves to the evening bells and the curfew rule without change in path or hour. Midday begins after the 2nd market window and the first set of morning tasks. The bell marks the pause. The hearth holds a steady flame suitable for boiling rather than high heat. Windows open to the measured span for a short airing, then close. Tools for the afternoon stand ready on the table or return to pegs if the day's work will not resume until later. The house checks that the door bar moves freely and that the sill mat is clean. Food is prepared in simple forms. If bread was brought from the market, a portion is set aside for the evening, the rest is cut into even pieces. A pot is set with water, a small measure of salt if owned, and either beans, peas, or chopped roots according to what the morning allowed. If a bone or a small piece of meat is available from an early purchase or a prior stock, it goes in first to boil longer. Greens, if any, are added late and cooked briefly. If nothing fresh is at hand, the morning pottage is lengthened with water and bread and returned to a simmer. The lid remains on to conserve fuel. A second pot heats water for washing after the meal. Places are set in a constant order. Bowls stand in the same positions, cups to the right of each bowl, knives at the outer edge. A cloth lies under the cups to catch drips. Persons sit in the same places each day so that passing of bowls is predictable. When the pot thickens, each person receives a portion in turn. If a person is under observation, a separate bowl and spoon remain in the sick room and do not return to the common wash. Conversation is limited to the afternoon plan and to short confirmations of tasks. After eating, dishes follow the two-step wash used each day. Grease is lifted with warm water and ash or a soap scrap. A second rinse with hot water finishes the set. Bowls drain on their edges. The wash water reserved from breakfast is used to wipe the table and bench fronts. The new hot water rinses the basin and cloths. The hearth is trimmed, embers drawn together, ash raked forward, and larger pieces placed for the afternoon boil if needed. The pot lids go to their hooks. The sand bucket remains at hand. Air and light are managed by measure. The shutter opens for the longest interval allowed by weather. Bedding near the window is turned once and returned. Clothes on pegs are brushed along seams. The floor under the table is swept toward the door and wiped with the remaining rinse water. The sill and latch receive a cloth with the weak sour mixture. Cloths from these acts drop into the house basket. Cloths used for the sick room remain on their own peg and basket. A short inventory follows. Grain jars are lifted to judge weight by hand and compared to the mark scratched on the side. Oil and vinegar are checked against their thread markers. Salt level is measured by the fixed scoop. Fuel at the hearth and near the door is counted in splits and small logs. If any item falls to or below its lower mark, a line is added to the slip by the door for the next permitted window. If the house will not go out until the next day, the line remains on the slip. The hour does not change. Household maintenance uses the middle of the day when lanes are quiet. Hinges receive a small measure of oil if they creak. Loose pegs in stool legs are tapped in with the hammer and a folded cloth to protect the wood. A frayed cord is twisted tighter or replaced. A shutter latch is filed to fit. If the roof shows a leak from the morning rain, a note goes on the door strip to call a carpenter on the next pass with a trade permit. Small holes in clothing are stitched with plain thread. Larger repairs move to the afternoon if light remains. These acts are recorded only when parts or paid work enter. Ordinary adjustments do not enter the ledger. Apprentices and older children complete light tasks within the room or yard. They sort beans by size into 2 bowls to balance cooking times. They tie herbs in small bundles with twine, label with a pencil mark for the week, and hang them in a dry place. They fold boiled cloths from the morning and place them in the chest, separating house, hands, dishes, and sick room by the marks described earlier. They count nails and pegs and return the small box to its place. If a note must be left at a neighbor's threshold, an adult writes it and an older child carries it to the sill and back without delay. The sick room receives its midday check at the same point each day. The caregiver performs the standard order: heat, breath, moisture, swelling, strength, liquids taken, sleep, pain, skin change, and passing of water. A spoon of barley water or thin broth is offered and recorded. The window opens by the set measure and closes after the count. Cloths covering the bed are adjusted if damp. The bowl for washing is refilled from the pot prepared after the meal. Notes are brief and use the same words as in the morning. If a watcher is scheduled for any hour around midday, the house prepares a short line with address and door position so the watcher can find the room without delay. The watcher enters only if listed. On departure, the watcher leaves a single line note: watched, hour, one word. The caregiver pins the note under the sick room stone. If the watcher does not arrive by the written hour, the beadle receives a slip at the next window. Neighbor assistance follows rotation. If the house owes water or fuel delivery for a confined neighbor at this hour, the person assigned lifts the filled jar or tied bundle of wood, goes by the right-hand side, sets the item on the sill, steps back, receives a nod or a strip, and returns. If the house is the receiver, the sill remains clear and the strip lies ready. The neighbor list on the door is marked with a small line in the proper square. No words beyond name and hour are exchanged. Workshop tasks resume in the lighter portion of the afternoon if they can be completed before the next bell. Cloth cutting, simple assembly, or trimming of pieces occurs at the table. The day's orders on a folded paper are placed at the edge and worked from top to bottom. Finished items for delivery move to a board near the door and are bundled for the window that follows. If no delivery will occur today, bundles are marked and set aside under the board. The ledger receives a brief line per piece or per bundle: date, item, count, and name if known. Heat and smoke-producing tasks conclude early. Lime slaking, dye boiling, or any process requiring a strong fire ended in the late morning. If any remains, it is finished now. The hearth returns to a small, steady flame. The brazier is either cooled or moved to the yard for brief use and then cooled again. Windows admit air on the longer interval after heat ends. The sand bucket is checked. If low, a small sack is filled from the yard or the nearest marked heap and returned. Letters and slips are organized for the runner window later in the day. The household writes any notes for officials: a request for a pass correction, a report of a conduit break if seen, or a line about a broken stone at the lane corner. Each note uses one sentence with the serial number if a notice is involved. A slip for the ward board about shortages can be added if the morning's market sheet showed change. Slips collect under the sill stone until the hour for pouches. If the quarter supervisor makes the midday round with updated notices, the house listens at the window while he reads the short lines. If a lane changes class for the afternoon, the route for any planned errand is adjusted on the door strip. If hours shift due to weather, the new hour is copied and the old hour crossed with a single line. No questions are asked. The supervisor does not remain in the lane. The crier's second pass repeat the same lines. If one pass is missed, the other suffices. Waste handling moves on the posted days and hours only. If the bucket has reached its mark, it is taken to the gutter during the allowed slot. The lid stays on until the bucket is over the gutter. The bucket is rinsed with hot water and a little ash, then closed. Lime is sprinkled according to the scoop measure at the latrine. If no removal occurs this day, the bucket remains in the yard covered. The position of the bucket avoids the path of feet and the yard drain. Rest is treated as a short, scheduled interval, not an absence of tasks. After the room is aired and dishes are finished, persons sit or lie for a set span marked by the sandglass or strokes with a stick. Windows remain partly open at the limit set by weather. The hearth remains low. No cloths hang over flame. The door bar remains in place. At the end of the span, persons return to tools or to the sick room check. If sleep occurs, it does not move the next check or the next window for movement in the lane. Clothing and bedding rotations are advanced during midday when drying is possible. If a shirt or undercloth reaches its mark for change, it is removed, folded, and placed in the wash basket. A fresh piece from the chest replaces it. Bedding in the common room is turned, not stripped, unless a boil has already occurred. Full change moves to the next morning to match boiling hours. Towels marked by 2 stitches rotate on the same cycle. Sick room towels remain separate. Fuel planning for the evening is done now. Small splits lie ready for the evening meal. A single larger log sits by the hearth for banking until curfew. If wood stores approach the lower mark, a small note adds "wood" measure to the slip by the door. If the house relies on charcoal for cooking, a covered pan is filled to the line. No new purchase occurs at midday unless the board shows an added porta window. Otherwise, purchases wait for the next morning's window to reduce crossings. The house checks pass papers for the afternoon. If a household errand pass is valid for a late window, it is placed on the belt or cord near the door. If a trade permit is needed for a small delivery across wards, the folded paper is reviewed. Origin, destination, route, hour band. If the band is too narrow for the pace of the house, the errand moves to the next day rather than risking a late return. Papers remain visible so the watch can read them without delay. Apothecary goods, if kept, are inspected for measure and label. Jars stand dry and closed. If a syrup nears its end, the paper is kept for the next purchase so the label words can be repeated exactly. If rose water or vinegar water is low, the next morning's slip includes the needed small bottle. The medical box holds its balance, spoon, pins, and strips of linen. Items do not leave the box for other uses. The box returns to its shelf after the midday check. If weather changes, adjustments are written on the door strip. Heavy rain moves drying from yard lines to indoor poles with spacing increased to allow air. Frost shortens airing intervals and moves the second cloth boiling to the following morning if fuel is tight. Heat shortens the midday rest and increases the number of short airings. Wind from the exposed quarter closes one window and opens the lee window instead. These lines use few words and the same order each time. At the end of the midday block, the room returns to readiness. Bowls and cups stand dry. The table is wiped. The hearth holds a small, even fire. The house, hands, dishes, and sick room baskets sit with lids. The sill mat is clean. The door strip shows any errands moved to the next window. The sick room notes carry the midday line. tools lie in order for the afternoon tasks. The house waits for the next bell and moves into the afternoon sequence without change in rule or phrase. The day ends without change in rule. The last market session closes. Ropes lift and are coiled. The weighing table is wiped and the stones return to their box. Inspectors sign their sheets and carry them to the town hall. Sellers wrap remaining goods and mark what moves to the hospital kitchen. The steward totals entries and pins the count. The square clears. In lanes, errands finish inside the posted windows. Household passes return to hooks. Trade permits fold and sit under stones near the door. Carriers make the last deliveries to thresholds and collect strips. Misdelivered parcels move to lane hooks for the next round. Shed doors shut. Wrappers with end hours for the morning lie in a row. The beadle ties a cord across the shed entry and writes the hour on a slip. At home, the evening meal uses the smallest fire of the day. Bread is cut and a thin pottage warms. Cups and bowls return to their positions. After eating, dishes are washed in 2 steps and left to dry on their edges. The hearth is banked for the night with ash. A larger log rests beside it for the next morning. The lamp wick is trimmed and set low. The shutter opens for a short airing, then closes at the stroke. The door bar slides into place and is tested. The sick room follows its last check before curfew. The caregiver repeats the same order of observation, writes the lines in the same words, and sets a spoon of liquid if the person is awake. Cloths are adjusted and the bowl is refreshed from the kettle. Air opens for the measured span, then closes. The notes record as before or less hot or another short word. If sleep comes, the room remains still. The overcloth for the caregiver is folded on its peg for the next day. Neighbor exchanges stop at the bell. Sill stones return to their places. Hooks hold the lane tools in order. The rotation board shows the notches for water and fuel. Empty squares remain for the morning. Barrier tables list 2 or 3 pending deliveries for the first window tomorrow. The watch walks past each gap, checks cords and posts, and writes secure with the hour. The watch makes its curfew rounds. Shutters that leak light receive a knock and a short word. A ledger line notes, shutter corrected, hour. Transit-only boards at corners turn to the night side. Gate wickets close. The main leaves bar. The gate book shows last entries for carts, with a plain line for none after, if the hour passed without movement. A small lamp hangs behind the wicket so the clerk can read. Church doors shut before the second bell. The sacristy chest is locked and the key returns to its hook. Cloths hang on their lines. The register shows short entries for the day, and the deacon adds the count of slips read at noon. The porch board carries the same hours for the morning unless a new sheet lies ready on the clerk's table. Lamps are dark. The burial ground gate bars on time. The keeper closes the book with the last trench position used. Tools stand in stacks. Lime tubs hold their lids. If rain filled a trench, a line reads water, delay, next row. If heat required more lime, a line reads lime, 2 extra scoops. The path lies clear. No one enters after the bell. Records close in a simple order. The ward book receives totals of passes, refusals, warnings, fines, and window counts. The supervisor copies the illness summary, marks set, marks removed, and total undermark. The market sheets show fines paid and stalls checked. The shed book lists wrappers cut and bales released. The key book shows chalk marks wiped from cleared bows. The town clerk tallies the lines and ties the day's bundle. Numbers move to the weekly total without comment. Inside houses, baskets sit with lids. The wall strip shows ticks in all squares for the day. Airing, wiping, boiling, dishes, floor, bucket, latrine, pending parcels. If a square remains blank, a dot marks the delay for the morning. Grain jars and oil pots face outward with date marks visible. The mat at the sill is clean and dry. The small board by the door lists tomorrow's errands by window. Water, bread, fuel, shed, letter. If there is no pass for a window, the line waits until a pass is granted. Quarantine lines hold until their hour. Barriers remain tied. Tables at the gaps show short list for the morning. Houses under term keep shutters closed. Neighbors outside set nothing more on sills after curfew. Holding houses are quiet. The Beatles' morning time sits at the head of each list. Wrapper marks on pending bundles show release hours that fall after first light. No one moves a rope or a peg. Apprentices and older children finish small tasks inside. Cloths boiled earlier in the day are folded and placed by their marks in the chest. Tools return to pegs or to the box in a fixed order, so morning work starts without search. Notes for the runner sit under the sill stone. Tallies for small loans pair with their halves in a pouch. Coin lies wrapped in strips on the same shelf as before. Weather notes for the next day sit on boards. If rain is expected, the market line includes fish under bridge roof. If frost is likely, sand at first bell appears on ward boards. If wind shifts, a key line names the lee rings. These lines use few words and whole hours. They do not change pass types. They do not extend windows beyond curfew. Silence spreads by rule rather than mood. No calls sound in lanes. Footsteps of the watch pass and fade. A bell marks the last stroke. Lamps dim behind shutters. The city holds to the same pattern it used at dawn. Doors closed, windows set, tools in place, notes written. The sequence will begin again when the first light shows and the opening bell sounds. This account stops where the day stops. Tasks completed are marked. Tasks delayed carry a dot for the morning. No measures are lifted here and no new orders are given. The order of actions, waking, inspection, water and fuel, street rules, market, work and duty, notices, hygiene and handling of goods, neighbor assistance, household medicine, observation, quarantine, movement, church practice, burial, midday routine, and evening closure remains available to be repeated. The city does not promise change by itself. It keeps hours, marks doors and wrappers, counts and records. When a notice with different hours appears, the same hands will follow the new lines. Until then, the next day matches this one.